Hey everyone, welcome to Paranormal M. Before we begin, turn on notifications so you don't miss any future videos. And if you enjoyed tonight's stories, please give the video a like. Our first story comes from someone who has followed paranormal content for over 15 years and has had a few strange experiences of their own. They believe that many of the things we call ghosts could actually be older beings that different cultures have called jinn, fairies, sprites, or local spirits. Whether you agree with the theory or not, it gives us a lot to think about. Now let's begin, and I hope everyone sleeps well. You know, I've spent a lot of time thinking about ghosts, jinn, spirits, whatever name people want to give them. And honestly, I don't think they're all that different from the beings humans have talked about since the beginning. I imagine they're individuals, just like we are. Some might be calm, some curious, some easily irritated. Maybe they've existed longer than humanity and occupy a part of reality that falls outside the range of light we can normally see. That could explain why we only catch glimpses of them as shadows, shapes, or apparitions. My theory is that they feed on powerful emotions. Fear and anxiety are probably the easiest emotions to provoke, but maybe those aren't the only ones they can use. I think some of these beings choose a particular location and become connected to it. They might also attach themselves to people who disturb them or leave a powerful emotional impression behind. When those people eventually die, their memories and final experiences could become a kind of repeating signal at that location. That might be what we call a residual haunting, but I don't think the repetition is necessarily accidental. I wonder whether those ghostly reenactments act like bait. People hear footsteps, see a figure in a window, or notice a door opening on its own, so they investigate. The longer they remain, the heavier the atmosphere becomes. Fear builds, anxiety rises, and eventually, something dramatic happens. Then everything suddenly goes quiet. In a lot of paranormal investigations, that pattern seems to repeat. Activity slowly increases, reaches one intense moment, and then fades away almost completely. In my mind, that could mean the entity has taken what it needed and gone dormant again, leaving the residual activity behind to attract the next group. It could also explain why some spirits seem desperate to make people leave. Maybe they aren't threatening the visitors. Maybe they're warning them. Perhaps they're afraid of whatever is sleeping there too. I've even wondered whether certain entities can abandon their original territory and follow someone home. Imagine a soldier stationed near an abandoned settlement overseas, one of the final people to pass through after the population disappeared. If the being connected to that place no longer had anyone nearby, why would it remain there? Maybe it would attach itself to one of the last people who carried a strong emotional presence through the area. That doesn't mean the person caused anything. They may simply have been noticed. Even so, I don't believe these beings are usually as violent as horror films make them seem. Most reported physical encounters involve something minor: a scratch, a tug, a small shove, or an object moving. Those incidents are frightening, but they rarely resemble the unstoppable monsters shown in movies. Their real influence seems psychological. They work through tension, uncertainty, and the feeling that something is watching from just beyond the edge of the room. To me, they're not necessarily evil. They might simply exist on the opposite side of a reality we share. What fascinates me is how many cultures describe similar beings. Islamic traditions speak of jinn as intelligent creatures with free will, who live within their own societies and may be good, neutral, or harmful. Older European traditions describe fair folk, household spirits, sprites, and local beings that could bring fortune when respected, or trouble when insulted. I don't mean gods in the grand sense of thunderbolts and temples. I mean the quiet presence in the forest, the thing beneath the stairs, or the unseen resident of a home that people once acknowledged through small rituals. You left it an offering and hoped it left your family alone. Maybe these traditions were describing the same broad category of life through different cultural languages. Perhaps what one community called a jinn, another called a fairy, a guardian, a trickster, or a local spirit. Some traditions describe jinn as beings of smokeless fire. I sometimes wonder whether that language was an ancient attempt to describe something made from an energy we cannot directly perceive. Not fire without smoke exactly, but something closer to invisible light. I know that idea raises scientific questions. If it produced heat, surely we would detect it. Still, the metaphor feels as though it might be pointing towards something real, even if the old description wasn't literal. The simplest version of my theory is this: humanity has always lived beside these beings. We once gave them names, stories, offerings, and attention. Over time, we stopped acknowledging them, but they didn't disappear. They simply found other ways to interact with us. And here's another thought that genuinely excites me. What if fear isn't the only emotion they can receive? Some people claim to have calm, detailed conversations with spirits. Security guards speak to someone who never appears on the cameras. An elderly woman chats with a familiar presence in an empty room. Children describe visitors in closets or beneath their beds with surprising clarity. Maybe those encounters happen because the person isn't afraid. Maybe a being will accept affection, curiosity, admiration, or respect just as readily as fear. Fear might be fast and intense, but kindness could create a deeper connection. You can tell a spirit that you come peacefully as many times as you like, but if your hands are shaking and every sound makes you jump, perhaps it senses the truth. Real calm can't always be performed. Maybe genuine innocence, compassion, or simple openness allows communication to happen without words. I also wonder whether modern technology has actually made spirits harder to observe. If they exist beyond our visible spectrum, perhaps they can detect the infrared sensors and low-light systems in our cameras. To them, a phone pointed into a dark hallway might look like a bright spotlight. Avoiding the camera could be easy. Paranormal investigations might still benefit them, though. Investigators arrive already expecting fear. The location gains attention, visitors keep coming, and emotional energy continues to build. That gives an entity a reason to reveal just enough to maintain the mystery, but never enough to prove what it is. Sometimes, during sensory deprivation experiments or spirit box sessions, an apparent presence begins answering questions with unusual clarity. Then, just as the conversation seems close to revealing something important, a scream, bang, or threatening event ends the session. I've always wondered whether that interruption is deliberate. Maybe there are rules. Maybe these beings belong to communities or societies of their own, and revealing too much is forbidden. I remember watching an investigation where a large group gathered in the center of an abandoned village. Some were experienced investigators, while others had never participated in anything paranormal before. There were more than 20 people sitting together beneath a pavilion, asking questions during a final experiment. Strangely, that was when the answers became clearest. It felt less like random noise and more like something sitting among them, listening carefully and responding to specific questions. One newcomer seemed to form an especially strong connection, and the responses appeared to confirm details they had mentioned earlier. Maybe the size of the group created enough emotional energy for communication. Or perhaps the variety of people mattered. Experienced investigators often arrive guarded and alert, while first-time visitors may bring a more natural mixture of wonder, nervousness, and sincerity. Of course, I know all of this is speculation. I enjoy exploring these ideas because I've had experiences that I still can't fully explain. As a child, I sometimes saw a tall, shadowed figure standing near my bedroom doorway at night. On another occasion, I heard something small searching through a bathroom while I was trying to fall asleep. opening cabinets and shifting objects even though no one was there. There have been other moments too. None of them gave me perfect answers, but they left me with the feeling that reality is stranger and more crowded than we assume. After years of watching paranormal investigations, studying folklore, and talking with people about their experiences, I've come to believe that something may have been here before us. Perhaps our ancestors worshipped it, feared it, bargained with it, and built stories around it. Now that most people no longer participate in those traditions, these beings may rely on curiosity and fear to draw us back. There's one final possibility I find fascinating. Maybe some hauntings are created by us. There's an idea called an egregore, a presence formed or strengthened through the shared attention and belief of a group. If thousands of people repeatedly enter a house expecting it to be haunted, their fear and imagination might gradually leave an imprint. Eventually, the place may begin behaving exactly as everyone expects. That could explain why famous hotels, amusement parks, theaters, and historic homes develop so many ghost stories. Millions of people pass through them, carrying excitement, grief, nostalgia, fear, and expectation. Perhaps all of that emotion accumulates. Maybe some spirits are ancient beings. Maybe some are echoes of people who died. And maybe some are stories that became strong enough to start telling themselves. Whatever the truth is, I don't think ghosts are simply monsters waiting in dark rooms. I think they may be part of an ecosystem we no longer understand, shaped by attention, emotion, memory, and belief. We didn't stop living beside them. We just stopped noticing. Okay, so, have you considered running away forever? Maybe sprinting into the distance while screaming. I'm kidding. Mostly. But honestly, some of the most terrifying moments of my life have been caused by children. Not because they were trying to scare me either. That's the worst part. They were just existing, completely unaware that they had turned the room into a low-budget horror film. And thank goodness they didn't know. If my kids ever realized how easy it was to frighten me, they would have made it their full-time job. My youngest daughter's favorite family story is about the night I almost punched her. Please lower the pitchforks. No children were harmed. She was around 4 years old at the time. I was working long shifts, taking evening classes, and surviving on maybe 5 hours of sleep. My brain wasn't really a brain anymore. It was more like cold oatmeal with responsibilities. One night, I was finally getting some precious sleep when my daughter came into my room because she wanted a glass of water. Perfectly normal. Except my body decided that this would be the ideal moment to experience sleep paralysis for the first and only time in my life. Because apparently my nervous system enjoys drama. I opened my eyes and saw what looked like a tiny shadow creature standing beside my bed. It had dark, empty eyes, and it was speaking in my daughter's voice. Meanwhile, I couldn't move. Not a finger, not a toe, nothing. I was absolutely terrified, and my first clear thought was, I have to punch the demon child. Fortunately, sleep paralysis had completely frozen my body, so my heroic battle against the supernatural never happened. Eventually, I could move again. The horrible little creature turned back into my thirsty 4-year-old, and I realized what had happened. My daughter thinks this story is the funniest thing she has ever heard. She tells it to her friends without context, too. She'll casually announce, "My mom almost punched me in the middle of the night," and then leave me to deal with the horrified expressions. Only after everyone starts looking deeply concerned does she explain that I was hallucinating during sleep paralysis. I'm fairly certain this story will appear in every major event of her life. Graduation speech, wedding toast, retirement party, my funeral. She will keep it alive long after I'm gone. And for the record, I hated sleep paralysis. Every second of it. It only lasted a few minutes, but those were some of the longest minutes of my life. And I have experienced childbirth. Children are frightening even when there's a completely logical explanation. Sometimes, they don't even need sleep paralysis. A friend's little niece was visiting one afternoon, and the two of us were sitting in the living room while my friend made sandwiches in the kitchen. The girl suddenly looked at me and said, very calmly, "There's a man in my closet. His coat is made out of mouths, and they all whisper when he gets hungry." She said it with the same cheerful tone a child might use to tell you that butterflies are pretty. I just stared at her for a moment and said, "So, would you like a cookie?" Because what else was I supposed to do with that information? She happily accepted the cookie and immediately started talking about a children's television show, as though she hadn't just planted a brand new nightmare directly into my brain. I still think about that closet creature sometimes. I've even dreamed about it. So thank you, mysterious little child. That was a wonderful gift. Honestly, hearing about that thing in your basement copying your mom's voice gave me chills. I genuinely don't know how you kept your composure. If something had approached me like that, I probably would have frozen on the spot. You mentioned having a video of it, and I'd really like to see it. Is it posted somewhere? Maybe on YouTube? What you said about certain entities not knowing how to move naturally really stuck with me. I've heard similar theories before, especially when people talk about supernatural creatures trying to imitate human voices. They might get the words right, but something about the rhythm feels wrong. The pauses are too long, the tone shifts strangely, or the voice sounds almost mechanical. It reminds me of one of the most frightening stories I ever heard on a paranormal television show. A man named Evan described something that happened when he was 17. He was staying at his family's cabin in a remote wooded area while his parents drove into town for groceries. He was sitting alone in the living room when he happened to glance through the window. At the edge of the trees, he saw something standing upright. He said it had the general shape of a deer, but its body was much too tall and thin. Its head looked like an exposed deer skull, and the space around it seemed distorted, almost like heat rising from a road. Naturally, Evan panicked and dropped beneath the window. That was when he heard it move. It crossed the distance from the woods to the cabin in only 3 steps. 3 impossibly slow, heavy steps. First came the sound of something striking the dirt, then the gravel driveway, and finally the wooden porch. He could hear hooves scraping across the boards. A few seconds later, the doorknob began to turn. Then his mother's voice came from the other side of the door. "Evan, let me in. I left my keys inside." At first, it sounded almost perfect, but as the voice continued, he noticed a strange trembling beneath the words. He described it as a warped, watery sound, like someone speaking through a damaged radio. The sentences also came out with the wrong rhythm, as though whatever was outside understood the words, but not how a human being would naturally say them. That tiny mistake was what convinced him not to open the door. The creature eventually left, but according to Evan, that wasn't the end of it. Over the years, he continued seeing it near wooded places. Sometimes it would stand far between the trees. Other times, he would only hear those heavy steps following him. Years later, while visiting his girlfriend, she woke during the night and saw a tall, blurred figure standing near her bedroom doorway. She had never heard Evan's story before, but the description she gave matched the creature almost exactly. Stories like that completely fascinate me. I truly believe there is far more to this world than what we can detect with our ordinary senses. There are too many strange accounts from different cultures, generations, and parts of the world for me to dismiss every single one as imagination or dishonesty. Of course, science needs evidence that can be observed, measured, and repeatedly tested. Paranormal experiences rarely happen under controlled conditions, which makes them incredibly difficult to prove. Still, the absence of accepted scientific proof doesn't automatically mean that every person who has experienced something unexplained is lying. Another story that stayed with me came from an episode of A Haunting. A woman woke in the middle of the night and found a dark, inhuman face hovering only inches above hers. She said it stared directly into her eyes and released this low, furious hiss. I'm not embarrassed to admit that after watching that episode, I slept with a lamp on for several nights. Some stories don't leave when the television turns off. Okay, this still unsettles me whenever I think about it, mostly because I've never been able to explain the feeling I had that day. I've always been sensitive to people's energy. I'm spiritual, but I wouldn't call myself religious. Every now and then I'll meet someone, look into their eyes, and feel this sudden warning move through my body. It's only happened a handful of times, and later I usually find out there was a reason I felt uneasy. But this experience was different. This was the only time the word demon entered my mind. I hadn't planned anything unusual that afternoon. I just wanted to take a quiet walk beside a river trail. It was a gray, bitterly cold day, and the small parking area was almost completely empty. As I got out of my car, I noticed a man near the far end of the trail, where the path opened into the parking lot before continuing into the trees. He was barefoot. He had on a thin t-shirt and loose sweatpants, even though it was freezing. He was standing near a picnic table, shouting, "Help! Somebody help me!" I immediately felt hesitant. I was alone, and as a woman, I knew I needed to be careful. Still, I didn't want to ignore someone who might genuinely be hurt. So I slowly crossed the parking lot, stopping several meters away from him. "Are you okay?" I asked. He said something about having a thorn or an insect stuck in his foot. I couldn't completely understand him. Then he asked whether I had any water. I told him I did and that I would go back to my car to get some. As soon as I turned away, he started muttering under his breath. There was a lot of swearing, although I couldn't make out every word. His whole manner suddenly changed, and I could feel myself becoming more uncomfortable. At that point, I assumed he was either mentally unwell, under the influence of something, or possibly both. But it was so cold, and he clearly wasn't doing well, so I decided to help while keeping my distance. I went back to the car and found a spare plastic bottle. I poured some of my water into it while watching him from the corner of my eye. I could hear him calling for help again. At one point, I thought I heard him insult me, but I wasn't certain. I just kept reminding myself to stay alert. When I walked back, I didn't hand him the bottle directly. I placed it on the picnic table in front of him. Then he looked up. Our eyes met. I don't know how else to describe what happened next. A violent shudder moved through my entire body, from my shoulders all the way down my spine. Every hair on the back of my neck stood up, and immediately, without any conscious thought, one word appeared in my mind. Demon. His eyes were blue, but they were almost completely clouded over. Even the whites had a pale, milky appearance. It could have been a medical condition, I understand that. There are plenty of reasonable explanations for the way his eyes looked. I've tried to rationalize the entire encounter many times. I was alone in an isolated place. He was behaving unpredictably. He might have been homeless, frightened, sick, intoxicated, or experiencing a mental health crisis. Of course my body would have been on high alert. I know all of that. But I've encountered distressed people before. I've seen people shouting in the street, talking to themselves, or behaving erratically. I've also met people with cloudy or damaged eyes. None of those encounters made me feel what I felt when that man looked at me. It wasn't simply fear. It felt heavy, dark, almost as though there was something underneath the person I was looking at, staring back through him. I began backing away very slowly. I didn't turn around until I had put a safe distance between us. He was still barefoot, bending over and struggling with whatever was hurting his foot. The moment I finally turned toward my car, the swearing started again. I got inside, locked the doors, and called a friend as I drove away. My friend was horrified that I had approached him at all. She reminded me how dangerous it can be when a stranger asks a woman for help in an isolated place. Another friend later pointed out that some violent criminals have used injuries or helplessness to lure people closer. I know helping him could have ended badly, and I'm deeply grateful that nothing happened. But what stayed with me wasn't only the danger of the situation, it was that look. I haven't told many people about the word that entered my mind because it sounds dramatic, especially coming from someone who isn't religious. I'm not saying I know what he was, or that there wasn't a perfectly ordinary explanation. I only know what I felt. For one brief moment, when he stared directly into my eyes, it seemed as though my body recognized something before my mind could understand it. And even now, I still can't completely shake the feeling that something deeply wrong was looking back at me that day. People dream about winning the lottery all the time. Most of us wake up, smile at the thought, and dismiss it as nothing more than our imagination playing with us. But every so often, someone wakes up with numbers they simply cannot forget. That is what happened to a former hotel cleaner named Marie Dalton. A few nights before a major lottery drawing, Marie dreamed that she was holding a ticket with 6 winning numbers printed across it. The dream felt unusually real. She could see the ticket clearly, hear the excitement around her, and even feel the paper trembling in her hands. When she woke up, she immediately wrote the numbers down. Marie was so convinced that the dream meant something that she bought not 1, but 2 tickets using the exact same combination. Now, buying 2 identical tickets does not increase the chance of those numbers being drawn, but Marie was not trying to improve the odds. She had a feeling that other people might choose the same numbers, and she wanted a larger share if the jackpot had to be divided. And that is exactly what happened. When the numbers were announced during an early autumn drawing, every one of Marie's dream numbers appeared. Another player had also selected the winning combination, but because Marie held 2 matching tickets, she received 2 shares of the prize. Her total winnings came to nearly $16 million, and Marie's story is far from the only one. A delivery driver named Martin Tyler had been playing the same numbers for almost 30 years. He said they first came to him in a dream shortly after his father passed away. In the dream, his father stood beside him and calmly recited a sequence of numbers. Martin woke up, wrote them down, and continued playing them year after year. To everyone else, they were ordinary digits. To him, they felt like a message he was not supposed to ignore. Then there was Elena, a woman whose life had taken a painful turn after she became seriously ill. Medical expenses drained her savings, and eventually, she was forced to sell her home. Just when she felt she had reached the end of her strength, something extraordinary happened. Numbers she had dreamed about almost 3 decades earlier appeared in a late December lottery drawing. After years of holding on to them, Elena had finally won a life-changing jackpot. Another remarkable case involved a family who quietly claimed an enormous Mega Millions prize. They chose to remain anonymous, but they revealed one unusual detail. The night before buying the tickets, one family member dreamed of relatives calling out several numbers. He woke up unable to shake the feeling that they were important. He bought 10 tickets, arranging the dream numbers in different combinations and mixing them with meaningful family dates. One of those combinations won a jackpot worth close to $200 million. In Malaysia, a shop owner repeatedly dreamed of two four-digit numbers, 3867 and 5795. She did not see them only while sleeping. She began noticing similar patterns on receipts, signs, and everyday objects. Eventually, she entered both numbers in a jackpot game. When the drawing took place, both sets appeared. She was so stunned that she asked her son to check the ticket several times. The prize was worth millions. An Australian man had a similar experience. Years earlier, he dreamed that he had used a particular set of numbers to win first prize. The dream stayed with him because it felt less like fantasy and more like a memory of something that had already happened. He kept playing those numbers for years. Then one Sunday, he became the only top prize winner in the drawing and collected more than $3 million. There was also a Canadian woman named Dina who continued playing numbers her husband had dreamed about 20 years earlier. Even after losing her job during a difficult economic period, she kept buying the occasional ticket with that same combination. One day, those numbers brought her a $60 million prize. Perhaps one of the strangest stories belongs to a retired man named Alvin Cole. He dreamed of a simple sequence: 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. It almost looked too obvious to play. Most people would assume that a neat sequence like that could never win. But Alvin trusted the dream and spent only a few dollars on a ticket. Every number was drawn in order. He won $250,000 and later admitted that the reality of it still had not fully reached him. In Manitoba, Marina Daigle had played the same meaningful numbers for decades. They represented the ages of her relatives when the family moved to Canada, along with the date they arrived. The night before one particular drawing, Marina dreamed that she had won a fortune and was sharing it among her loved ones. The next day, her numbers won nearly $7 million. Two retired friends, Gerard Olin and Mark Lavoie, also spent years playing numbers that came from an old dream. Mark had dreamed of the combination back in the 1990s. He woke up, wrote it down, and eventually memorized every digit. The friends played together for around 20 years. Then one evening, Mark saw the lottery results on television. The numbers looked instantly familiar. He jumped to his feet and thought, "I really hope Gerard bought the ticket this week." Gerard had. They split a jackpot of more than $5 million. Of course, there is another side to all of this. Thousands of people probably dream about lottery numbers that never win. We rarely hear their stories because nothing remarkable follows. That makes it impossible to prove that these winning dreams were genuine predictions rather than extraordinary coincidences. Still, the stories leave us with an intriguing question. What if dreams sometimes reveal information that our waking minds cannot understand? We experience time as a straight path. Yesterday sits behind us, tomorrow waits ahead, and we move between them one moment at a time. But some ideas in physics suggest that time may be far more complicated at the quantum level. Under certain theoretical conditions, processes may appear to support opposing directions of time rather than one simple flow from past to future. That does not prove that anyone can dream tomorrow's lottery numbers. But it does invite us to wonder whether our perception of time tells the whole story. Maybe these winners were simply lucky. Maybe their minds noticed patterns and gave them meaning afterward. Or perhaps, for one brief moment while they slept, they caught a faint glimpse of something waiting further down the road. Whatever the truth may be, I think that is why these stories stay with us. They are not only stories about money. They are stories about intuition, patience, hope, and those strange dreams that feel so real we cannot bring ourselves to ignore them. My grandparents' house was the kind of place where strange little things happened so often that most of us eventually stopped talking about them. We would hear footsteps, catch movement out of the corner of an eye, or feel as though someone had entered a room when no one was there. But 3 experiences have stayed with me all these years. The first happened when I was a child. My grandfather had this old reclining chair that he loved, and I used to lie across it upside down with my legs folded over the back. One afternoon, while my grandmother was alone with me in the kitchen baking cinnamon bread, my entire body suddenly froze. I was completely awake. I could see and hear everything, but I could not move or call for her. Then I noticed something crawling toward me. It looked almost human, but not quite. Its body was smooth and pale, with no face, hair, clothing, fingers, or even proper feet. At that age, I had never seen a mannequin before, but that is the closest way I can describe it now. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. Tears filled my eyes and everything became blurry. Just before the figure reached the chair, my grandmother came into the room, picked me up, and held me. She kept asking what had happened, but I was too frightened to explain. Over the next few years, I sometimes lay in that same position, just to see whether it would happen again. I know that sounds strange, but part of me needed to know whether it had been real. Every time, the paralysis returned, and every time, that faceless thing came closer. The final time, it reached out and touched my arm. I still could not move or make a sound. Then everything went black. When I opened my eyes, my grandmother was standing over me, shouting my name and asking why I would not wake up. Not long after that, my grandparents got rid of the chair. I never saw the figure again. At least, I do not think I did. The second experience happened years later. I was sleeping alone in an upstairs bedroom while my grandparents slept downstairs. I woke in the middle of the night and checked my phone. It was a little after 2 in the morning. That was when I heard someone struggling to breathe. The sound came from the bottom of the staircase. Slowly, it began moving upward. Between each breath, I heard something dragging or crawling across the steps. I lay still and pretended to be asleep, keeping one eye slightly open. The bedroom door creaked wider, and something crawled inside. It looked like a woman covered in thick fur, or perhaps extremely long, tangled hair. As it moved past the bed, the rough hair brushed against my feet. I could feel it. It crawled into the corner and stayed there, making low, growling sounds between those terrible, strained breaths. I tried to pray, but I was so frightened that I kept forgetting the words. Finally, I forced myself to slow down and finish the prayer properly. The moment I said the last word, the corner was empty. I ran downstairs, climbed into my grandparents' bed, and stayed there until morning. The third experience was different because everyone heard it. One evening, the whole family was gathered in the living room watching an old thriller. My grandparents were there, along with my mother, my 2 aunts, my uncle, one of my cousins, and me. Suddenly, my uncle paused the movie. Heavy footsteps were running across the floor upstairs, back and forth, as though someone were racing from one end of the hallway to the other. No one was upstairs. My uncle quietly asked whether anyone else had been hearing it. My mother and youngest aunt both said they had, but they had assumed the sound was coming from the movie. Then it happened again. Every person in that room heard it. My grandmother became furious. She believed whatever lived in the house had been frightening her children while leaving her alone. She marched upstairs, threw open every window, and began shouting into the empty rooms. She demanded that whatever was there leave her family alone. She even challenged it to come after her instead. She used a few words I probably should not repeat. Afterward, all of us went outside together for fresh air. Nobody wanted to remain inside that house for a while. There were many other stories too. Over time, my grandfather became so accustomed to the strange activity that his reactions could be more frightening than the events themselves. After my grandparents separated, two men once came to help him move a heavy box from upstairs. As they started down the staircase, one of the men suddenly panicked. He began yelling for help and desperately trying to escape, although no one could understand what he was seeing. The other man tried to calm him, but something seemed to shove him backward into the wall. My grandfather watched the whole thing happen. Instead of helping, he simply laughed and said, "Careful, it's coming to get you." That was just how he had become. By then, the house no longer frightened him. It had become an old companion. Hey, I want to share a story with you about Jody, a woman whose life took a turn from eerie nightmares to a hopeful new beginning, only for the past to creep back in when she least expected it. It's one of those stories that reminds you how the shadows of our past can linger, no matter how far we run. So, Jody had been living in this old apartment in Walnut Grove, and things were, let's just say, unsettling. Strange noises, cold spots, feelings that someone was watching her. Classic haunted apartment stuff. She finally reached out to the building manager, hoping for some answers or at least a change. The manager listened and offered her a deal. A new apartment downtown, in a different building, but with one catch. She couldn't talk about the haunted apartment anymore. No stories, no complaints, nothing. Jody was relieved and agreed right away. Who could blame her? She packed up, left behind the creaks and whispers of Walnut Grove, and moved on. And you know what? At first, life started to look up for her. The new place was quiet, brighter, and most importantly, peaceful. Jody landed a good job, met Joel Wiley, a kind and supportive partner, and slowly, she felt herself coming back to life. The nightmares stopped too. For a while, it seemed like the dark chapter was closed. But then, something unexpected happened. Her daughter, Hannah, began to see the same young woman Jody had seen in her nightmares. Hannah started drawing pictures of her, a woman with a hauntingly sad expression. One drawing was especially chilling. It showed a couple abusing the woman, her wrists tied high above her head. When Jody saw Hannah's drawings, a cold knot formed in her stomach. The spirit from her old apartment hadn't stayed behind. It had followed them. Jody wrestled with disbelief and fear, but after some deep thinking, she decided to confide in Joel. And to her surprise, really a pleasant surprise, Joel believed her. He didn't dismiss her fears, and instead encouraged her to dig deeper, to find out who this woman was. So, together, they spent hours at the library, flipping through archives, old newspapers, and records. And then, they found it. An article from 1976 about a young woman named Marie Spanhake who had gone missing. The address listed? Jody's old apartment in Walnut Grove. They kept reading, and there it was, a photo of Marie. And the moment Jody looked at it, her breath hitched. The woman in the picture was exactly who she'd been dreaming about. The nightmares came back, vivid and relentless. Determined to understand more, Jody reached out to a local crime journalist named Roger. She told him everything, the dreams, the visions, the abuse she saw. Roger listened intently, then shared a story that sent chills down Jody's spine. He told her about a couple, Cameron and Janice, from Red Bluff. They had kidnapped a young woman named Colleen and imprisoned her in a coffin under their bed, using her for their own twisted desires. Colleen's ordeal lasted 7 long years before the police finally rescued her. When Roger showed Jody pictures of Cameron and Janice, her heart sank. They were the same couple from her nightmares. And then came the darkest part. Janice had testified against Cameron, admitting that they had abducted and killed another woman a year before Colleen's capture. The victim's name? Marie Spanhockey. Her body was never found. Joel urged Jody to contact the police with all she knew. When she called, the detective was stunned, seriously surprised that Jody had so much detailed information. They were about to reopen Marie's case that very day. After hours of questioning, the police acknowledged the depth of Jody's knowledge, but without concrete evidence, they were limited in what they could do. But for Jody, this was more than just a case. It was validation. The nightmares, the spirit, the haunting, they were all real. And though the past still cast a long shadow, she was no longer alone in facing it. She had Joel, the police, and even the spirit of Marie, who, in a way, had found a voice through Jody. It's a story that stays with you, reminding us that sometimes the hardest battles are those we fight within ourselves, and that healing can come from facing the darkness head-on, with courage and the support of those who believe us. Hey, I want to share a story with you, one that's a little unsettling, but also deeply human. It's about a family and their encounter with something they couldn't explain, something that turned their dream home into a nightmare. So settle in, and I'll take you through every moment, every eerie sound, every shiver down their spines. It all starts with Garvin Hodges, a war veteran who landed a good-paying job in Lawton, Oklahoma. After years away serving, he was finally coming home to be with his family again. Garvin, his girlfriend Heather, her daughter Caitlin, and Garvin's brothers Kevin and Wesley, plus Wesley's girlfriend Sabrina, all packed into one big family. Garvin needed a house big enough for everyone, and in 2009, he found one that seemed perfect. A spacious home right in the heart of a peaceful neighborhood. Now, when Garvin first showed up at the doorstep, the previous tenant greeted him. The man seemed uneasy, his hands trembling a bit when Garvin asked why he was breaking his lease early. He danced around the question, saying he'd just felt he'd spent enough time in the house. But Garvin, who'd seen his share of stress and fear in the military, could tell this man was hiding something. Still, the house was just right, and the price was tempting, so Garvin asked if he could look inside. Here's where things start to get weird. The previous tenant agreed, but was hesitant to step inside. In fact, he never entered the house. Garvin walked in alone, and the moment his foot crossed the threshold, a cold, odd feeling gripped him, like the house was watching him. He wandered through the rooms, noticing all the lights were on, including the closet. Strange for a sunny afternoon when daylight poured through the windows. Despite this strange vibe, Garvin decided to take the lease. The previous tenant swiftly packed 2 trash bags and left, almost like he was fleeing. But Garvin shrugged it off. The family moved in. 2 weeks later, the first night of creepiness arrived. The family, everyone except Caitlin, was in the living room, watching TV, when heavy footsteps thundered from the floor above. Garvin, as the eldest, took it upon himself to investigate. He thought maybe Caitlin was wandering, but when he checked her room, there she was, sound asleep. The footsteps stopped, only to start again seconds later, this time from his own bedroom. Heart pounding, Garvin burst into his room, expecting to find an intruder. But the room was empty. No sign of anyone. Confused, he tried to rationalize it away, chalking it up to his imagination. Later that night, as Garvin and Heather settled into bed, Heather noticed that the closet light, which she'd turned off, was flickering back on. She mentioned it to Garvin, who suggested she might have forgotten to switch it off, but Heather was sure she hadn't. She got up, turned it off again, and went back to bed. Then, Garvin woke with a jolt. That feeling, the sensation of being watched, washed over him. When he opened his eyes, the closet door was ajar, and the light was glowing inside. He shook Heather awake and showed her, hoping she'd have a logical explanation. But she didn't. The next day, Garvin confronted his brothers, accusing them of pranking him. Kevin and Wesley denied it, saying it was probably faulty wiring. But Garvin was unconvinced and stormed off. A few nights later, Garvin awoke again. This time, he felt the bed beside him sink slowly, like someone had sat down. Heather felt it too. They leapt out of bed, flicked on the lights, and found the room empty. Garvin dashed to confront his brothers, only to find them fast asleep. Returning to Heather, the couple tried to make sense of it. Then, the closet light switched on by itself again, and through the grated door, a large shadow shifted. Garvin crept forward, opened the closet, and found nothing. No one. Deciding to sleep in the living room that night, they nearly drifted off when they heard glass shatter in the hallway. Investigating, they found a drinking glass smashed on the floor, far from any table. It seemed to have flown through the air. That was the moment Garvin realized they were dealing with something paranormal. The family started to feel the strain. Garvin grew irritable from sleepless nights. His brothers thought he was overreacting. One day, during a heated argument in the dining room, a glass suddenly flew off a kitchen table and shattered. That sight converted Kevin and Wesley. They finally believed Garvin. But money was tight, and moving wasn't an option just yet. Then came Zozo. One day, heavy footsteps thudded above again. The family bravely searched the upstairs but found no one. When they returned downstairs, they saw every cabinet, drawer, even the refrigerator and oven, all wide open. Later that night, while Garvin showered, the thumping returned. Heather rushed in to check on him, but as she stepped through the door, Garvin felt a burning pain on his back. He looked down to see 3 deep, claw-like marks appearing slowly. They fled the bathroom, and the footsteps stopped. That night, Kevin heard someone creep up the stairs and stop outside his door. He opened it, expecting a family member, but found no one. Then, eerie dragging sounds circled him. Opening his eyes, he caught sight of a crawling demonic figure. Then it vanished. Terrified, Kevin ran to Garvin, tears streaming. Garvin and Wesley armed themselves and checked Kevin's room. Nothing but flickering lights. On their way back, Garvin noticed a tapping at Caitlin's window. Pulling back the curtain, he saw the word Zozo written on the outside glass. Curious and scared, Garvin searched online and discovered Zozo was a demon linked to Ouija boards, known for bringing death, bad luck, and evil. So, the family made their own Ouija board with a shot glass as a planchette, desperate to communicate. At first, the glass didn't move. Then, a cold breeze swept the room, and the glass slid to yes, then no, then back again. When Sabrina asked its name, it spelled out Z-O-Z-O, over and over. Garvin asked the demon what it wanted, and the glass spelled, "Kill Gary." Suddenly, heavy thumping echoed overhead. The glass flew off the board, shattering, and chairs toppled around them. Heather grabbed the board, and as soon as she did, everything stopped. Terrified, the family burned the board. For a week, peace returned, but then the stomping started again. The brothers cautiously crept upstairs, hearing the sound from Garvin's room. Peeking through the door, they saw a monstrous, bull-headed demon pacing. It locked eyes with them and charged. Frozen with fear, they ran. Garvin's fear turned to fury as he shouted for the demon to come out. The demon descended the stairs, doors slammed, locking the family in the hall. The demon growled, a deafening sound that shattered glass around them. The shards swirled into a glowing cloud and shot toward the family. They ducked just in time, unharmed, but the demon vanished. The family moved out shortly after. Now, let me tell you about another family, the Wilsons, living in Springfield, Louisiana. Janine and her husband AJ finally bought a foreclosure with a perfect floor plan and a price that seemed too good to be true. They moved in September 2013, bringing their sons Hunter and Gage. Though the house needed work, they were excited. AJ even bought a camper van to live in while renovating. But soon, strange things began. One day, while painting, Janine's radio suddenly switched off on its own. She'd been alone in the house. No one touched it. She turned it back on, but it shut off again. This got her heart racing, especially since she had heart issues and needed medication. Months later, during Gage's birthday party preparations, Janine went to the store, leaving her mother Beverly alone. Beverly heard faint footsteps and felt movement, but saw no one. Then, she caught a glimpse of a figure behind her, and she ran out terrified. Janine returned to find her mother shaken. She searched the house but found nothing. AJ, ever the skeptic, blamed it on movies. One night, alone washing dishes, Janine felt a cold breeze despite all windows being closed. Then, something poked her hard, causing her to drop a dish. She spun around. No one there. Then, something yanked her hair fiercely. Terrified, she bolted to the camper van but realized she'd left her heart meds inside. Racing back, she grabbed them and fled again. Later, her son Hunter was talking to an invisible friend who threatened to hurt Janine if Hunter didn't befriend him. Janine's breath caught, but she hid her fear. Calling in her father Jeff for help, he was skeptical until he saw a rosary swinging on a door handle and heard heavy footsteps from the attic. Pictures fell, plaster rained down, and Jeff shouted, "Show yourself!" The noise stopped. Then, Janine showed Jeff 3 deep claw marks on her back. She sent the boys to grandparents for safety. AJ finally believed Janine after witnessing a door open and close on its own during an argument. The couple tried hanging crucifixes and reading the Bible around the house, but one night, the Bible levitated, slammed shut, and frightened them so much they fled to the camper van. Janine left a tape recorder in the kitchen, hoping to catch evidence. When she played it back, after silence, a demonic growl whispered, "She will die." Then came the worst. One afternoon, Janine heard her sons playing on the porch, but their voices faded. She found herself pinned down by an invisible weight in an upstairs bedroom. A demonic whisper urged her to look under the carpet. She tore it back, and immediately the pressure lifted. AJ discovered a massive pentagram with satanic symbols carved into the floor beneath the carpet, a sign someone had summoned a demon. They called a minister for help, scared and desperate. These stories remind us how sometimes, beneath the surface of what seems normal, something dark can lurk. For Garvin, Janine, and their families, their homes weren't just buildings. They were battlegrounds between light and shadow. Thanks for listening. Stay safe and trust your instincts. You never know what might be hiding in the quiet corners of a house. Hey there. I want to share with you some stories that have really stuck with me. Tales about haunted houses, possessions, and the kind of darkness that creeps in where you least expect it. So let's take a moment and dive into these chilling experiences together. First up, there was a minister who arrived at a house with a heavy sense of dread hanging in the air. The moment he stepped inside, he could feel the evil lurking within those walls. He wasn't alone. AJ and Janine were with him, walking each room as the minister recited verses from the Bible and sprinkled holy water in an attempt to cleanse the house. But as the ritual went on, Janine suddenly felt a wave of sickness wash over her. Her heart raced uncontrollably, and AJ, noticing her distress, gently guided her to sit down. Janine's breath grew shallow, her chest tightening as though something invisible was squeezing her. A darkness was creeping in, slowly swallowing her consciousness until she blacked out completely. It was terrifying to witness someone you care about lose control like that. The minister continued his work for about an hour, and when he finally finished, AJ went to check on Janine. She looked utterly drained, like every ounce of strength had been sucked from her body. Without hesitation, he decided to take her to her parents' house for safety. As they drove, AJ kept asking how she was doing, but Janine remained silent. Growing frustrated, he repeated the question more firmly. Suddenly, Janine lifted her head, her eyes, once familiar, now completely black. In a voice that wasn't hers, deep and demonic, she said, "I'm fine." That's when AJ realized the unthinkable. His wife was possessed. Speeding down the road, he raced to her parents' home, where Janine's parents waited anxiously. Despite her body feeling ice cold, her pulse was steady, which only added to the eerie feeling. When her mother asked what was wrong, Janine's eyes turned black again, and in that same chilling voice, she repeated, "I'm fine." The family gathered, reading Bible verses aloud, desperate to hold the darkness at bay. In a moment of clarity, Janine regained her senses and confessed that a demon was inside her. When the minister arrived, he saw the struggle firsthand. With AJ and Janine's father Jeff holding her down, the minister began the exorcism. Janine shook violently. Her eyes blackened once more as demonic growls filled the room. The minister anointed her forehead with holy oil, tracing a cross, while her family called out her name. Slowly, the blackness in her eyes faded, and she returned to herself, finally free. To escape the lingering evil, the family moved out with their sons in the cold January of 2014. Now, I want to tell you about a haunted mansion in Mansfield. Back in 1994, a newly divorced woman named Amy Moores was searching for a home. She stumbled upon an abandoned house that, despite needing a ton of work, captivated her artistic soul. It was like a blank canvas waiting for her touch. The house was up for auction, and before placing her bid, Amy arranged a walkthrough with the property manager. They started in the basement, where Amy's eyes caught sight of a strange concrete stone, mysterious and unmarked. Moving through the disordered rooms, she noticed the house was in complete chaos, particularly the third floor, a room littered with dead rodents and old hospital relics, remnants of a forgotten past. There was a fading board that read, "The Mansfield Training School," sparking questions about the house's history. The manager had no answers. The records were lost. Undeterred, Amy bid strongly and won the house. At night, after her day job, she began renovating alone. One night, while peeling old wallpaper near the ceiling, Amy accidentally cut her hand. As her blood dripped onto the floor, something unseen knocked her off the ladder. Lying there, stunned, she heard heavy footsteps running around her, but no one was visible. Fear gripped her, and she fled the house, returning only the next day for a thorough check, finding nothing out of place. A month later, renovations done, Amy and her daughter Alyssa moved in. Amy was thrilled, but Alyssa felt an unsettling darkness that chilled her bones. To face her fear, Alyssa explored the house, discovering a creepy old door blocking the staircase to the third floor. The door unnerved her, but curiosity pushed her to unlatch it. The instant it swung open, a blast of icy wind hit her, stealing her breath. Yet, Alyssa climbed the stairs, feeling eyes watching her every step. Suddenly, a breath ghosted her neck, cold and heavy. She fled the house. Weeks later, Amy was cooking dinner when heavy stomping shook the floor above them, vibrating through the ceiling. Grabbing a hammer, she cautiously ascended, with Alyssa trailing nervously. Just as Amy neared the third floor door, it slammed shut. Alyssa, overwhelmed with fear, ran outside. Amy opened the door but found an empty room, no explanation for the pounding sounds. The stomping worsened, and the mysterious door acted strangely, always opening on its own. Amy tried to secure it with an iron rod, but moments after stepping away, the rod flew off and the door creaked open. Terrified, Amy fled. One stormy night, Alyssa heard loud, eerie moans from her mother's room, louder than the rain outside. She knocked repeatedly, but there was no answer. Remembering she'd seen Amy leave for work earlier, Alyssa realized those sounds weren't her mother's. The creepy door to the third floor creaked open behind her, and she ran, only to collide with Amy returning home. With tension rising, Alyssa moved out, leaving Amy alone. Later, Amy rented rooms to her friend Dave, a detective going through a divorce. Dave dismissed the house's reputation, but soon he experienced it firsthand. Shadows darted past him, unseen forces threw objects, and guttural growls echoed through the halls. After a terrifying night, Dave packed up and left. Amy's son Bill, his fiancée Casey, and their baby moved in next. One night, while Bubba slept, the baby monitor picked up the lullaby, "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star," even though no toy played it. The song stopped abruptly, replaced by a deep voice calling, "Bubba." Startled, the couple rushed to the crib, but no one was there. Nightmares haunted the family. Amy dreamt she was a young girl, tormented and killed by a sinister woman. Visions linked to the house. Searching for answers, Amy photographed the interior. At a local pub, a friend recognized the house as the former House of Imbeciles, a mental asylum notorious for patient abuse. The young girl in Amy's dreams was a victim. Driven by curiosity and dread, Amy and Casey uncovered a concrete structure in the basement containing partially cremated human remains. Despite the horrors, Amy remains in the house, living with the shadows. Now, let me tell you about the Stowe family. Married in 1999, Mike and Stacy lived a happy life with their son Cameron. Stacy was expecting their daughter in 2004. One day, Stacy had a terrifying vision: Mike dying in a car accident. Her heart ached with premonition. Soon after, she learned it had come true. Mike had died. Life went on, Stacy raising her children alone in the same house, feeling Mike's presence. But then, strange things began. A glass teddy bear appearing mysteriously, the fireplace igniting itself, and whispers calling Stacy's name at night. One night, Stacy woke to find an indentation beside her bed, as if Mike had been there. She lay down beside it, comforted yet unsettled. Her children's nightmares revealed more darkness. Bryn was chased by a towering black figure with glowing cat-like eyes. One day, Bryn saw a man resembling her father, but as she neared, his face twisted into the demon from her dreams. Cameron, too, saw the black figure in the kitchen, its presence heavy and terrifying. Seeking help, the family called Johnny, a spiritual cleanser. During the ritual, Bryn felt the demon's grip on her ankle, but Johnny's chants forced it away. The house felt lighter, for a time. But nearly a year later, the evil returned. Bryn heard whispers begging for help, felt the blanket ripped away, and saw the black figure once more before sharp marks appeared on her chest. Stacy, alarmed, called in Claudia, a psychic medium. Claudia discovered the family's nephews had conducted a séance in the kitchen during a vacation, inadvertently inviting the demon in. Together, they completed the ritual properly, and peace returned to the house. These stories remind me that sometimes what we think we know, the comfort of a home, the presence of a loved one, can mask something far darker. In these houses, shadows linger, whispers haunt, and the line between the living and the unseen blurs. Thank you for listening, and remember to keep your heart brave, even when the night feels cold and full of secrets. Hey, I need to share something really unsettling with you. It's been a couple of nights now, and honestly, I feel like something is, well, after me. Let me explain. So the past 2 nights, I've been sleeping with my blinds wide open. Didn't even realize it until just recently. You see, my routine is pretty much the same. I leave for work when it's still dark outside, and I come back home when the sun's already set. But sleeping with those blinds open? I hadn't thought much of it until now. Each night, I'd keep waking up again and again, like some invisible presence was nudging me awake. I just moved here not too long ago, and someone mentioned, half joking, half serious, that this place is in Wendigo country. Yeah, that old folklore about these eerie, malevolent beings lurking in the woods. At the time, I laughed it off, but now, well, now I'm not so sure. This morning was particularly strange. I was outside, scraping the stubborn ice off my windshield, the air crisp and biting against my skin. Suddenly, right as I was focused on my task, the street lamp above flickered and went out. Immediately after, the motion sensor lights on the garage shut off too. What really got me was that every single house on the street went dark. No porch lights, no windows glowing, just pitch black. It was like the entire neighborhood had vanished into shadows. I felt this intense, almost primal fight or flight surge rush through me. I couldn't help it. I literally said out loud, "Nope," and hurried into my car. The weirdest part? I was almost scared to look out the windows. Something inside me screamed not to look at all, to avoid the darkness beyond the glass. It was like my instincts were trying to protect me from whatever was lurking just out there. Then, just as suddenly as it went off, all the lights flicked back on. The normalcy washed over me, and the fear started to fade. Later that evening, on my way back home, I experienced something else. I was driving along the highway when, out of the corner of my eye, I caught movement, something darting quickly beside my car along the shoulder, on the passenger side. That old surge of fear settled deep in my gut again. I tried to reason with myself, telling myself I was just being paranoid, that maybe it was a deer or some other animal. But the thing is, I couldn't stop looking out that window. And with deer crossing signs everywhere, I had to stay alert, which made glancing impossible to avoid. When I took my exit off the main road, the darkness felt thicker, more oppressive. No streetlights, just the cold beam of my headlights cutting through the night. My heart was pounding harder now. I tried to shake off the unease, but as I pulled onto my street, I heard it. This breathy sound, like a loud exhale or maybe a whispered hiss. And it wasn't inside the car. It felt like it was just outside, hovering close, right next to me. I pulled into the driveway with shaky hands, the cold air biting at my skin as I turned off the engine. Then, out of the corner of my eye again, I saw something, tall, quick-moving, dart behind my roommate's vehicle. I couldn't get a clear look at it. It was too fast, and the shadows swallowed it up almost instantly. That feeling of being watched, though, it hit me from every direction all at once. I was terrified to even switch off the car because I knew I'd have to leave its safety and walk just a few steps to the house. But with it being around 8 degrees Fahrenheit, staying outside was hardly an option. I bolted inside as fast as my legs could carry me, slamming the door behind me. Crossing that threshold, I finally felt a bit of relief. The house itself has been cleansed before, after some previous paranormal encounters, so I usually feel safe here. But when I got to my room and saw my blinds still open, that old fear surged back, fierce and unrelenting. I yanked them down quickly, shutting out the night and whatever was lurking beyond. Now, as I've been sitting here writing this down, I keep hearing it. Something brushing against the outside walls of the house. Sometimes it's soft, almost like a whisper of movement. Other times it's louder, like something is dragging itself along the siding. Sure, the wind could be a factor, but there's nothing near enough to the house that could cause those sounds. And my eyes keep being drawn back to that window, like some invisible force is pulling me toward it. I honestly have no idea what I saw tonight or the other night. But I know this. I feel like something is waiting for me. I've always been super sensitive to things most people can't see, and this is the first time since moving here that I've felt this overwhelming fear. even inside, where I should be safe, I can't shake the feeling that something is close. So, what do you think? What would you do if you were me? Because right now, I'm feeling scared, confused, and honestly, a little lost. You know, there are some stories that stay with you, not because you're certain they're true, but because so many people swear they experienced them. This one begins with President Abraham Lincoln. He died early on the morning of April 15th, 1865, after being shot the previous evening while watching a performance at Ford's Theater. The country mourned him, his family buried him, and history moved forward. But according to generations of White House residents and staff, President Lincoln never completely left the building. One of the earliest well-known accounts came from First Lady Clara Coolidge in the late 1920s. She said she entered an upstairs sitting room and noticed a tall, quiet figure standing beside the window. His hands were folded behind his back, and he was gazing toward the river as though carrying the weight of the entire nation on his shoulders. She said she knew immediately who he was. Years later, Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands was staying at the White House when someone knocked on her bedroom door late at night. When she opened it, she reportedly saw a solemn man in a dark frock coat and tall hat standing in the hallway. The shock was so great that she fainted. Then there's the story involving Winston Churchill. After taking a warm bath one evening, Churchill returned to his room with his cigar in hand, only to discover the former president standing silently near the fireplace. Churchill paused, looked at him, and calmly said, "Good evening, Mr. President. I must admit, you've caught me at a rather awkward moment." According to the story, the figure smiled faintly before disappearing. But it wasn't only world leaders and royal guests who sensed something unusual. First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt said she often felt a powerful presence in the White House, especially near the room associated with the late president. Her dog would occasionally stop outside the doorway, stare into the empty room, and bark as though someone were standing there. One of Roosevelt's assistants claimed she once entered the bedroom and saw a tall man seated on the edge of the bed, bending down as if he were fastening his boots. She was so frightened that she fled down the hallway calling for help. Other staff members reported hearing slow, heavy footsteps outside the room, long after everyone had gone to sleep. Some heard mysterious knocks at the door. Margaret Truman said it happened to her when she stayed there as a young woman. Her father, President Harry Truman, also spoke about strange sounds in the White House during the night. One of the later accounts came from a maintenance supervisor named Anthony Savory. In the early 1980s, he said he looked toward the top of a staircase and saw a tall man sitting quietly in a chair. The figure didn't speak. He simply watched. Anthony said he recognized the man immediately from the portraits hanging throughout the building. What makes this story so fascinating isn't only the number of sightings. It's the variety of people who reported them. A queen, a prime minister, first ladies, presidential family members, and longtime White House employees. Perhaps they all misunderstood what they saw. Perhaps the old building, with its creaking floors, deep shadows, and enormous history, played tricks on their minds. Or perhaps President Abraham Lincoln remained there because some part of him still felt responsible for the country he fought so hard to preserve. Whatever the truth may be, his story reminds us that certain lives leave such a powerful mark that even death seems unable to close the door behind them. I've never really told this whole story out loud before. Most people in my life don't enjoy talking about paranormal things, and honestly, I understand why. Some memories become heavier when you say them aloud, but I've carried these experiences for years, so I want to tell you about them as clearly as I can. It starts with my grandfather's house. He had lived there since he was barely 20. It was an old family home, the kind of place where several generations leave pieces of themselves behind. Years later, ownership passed to my mother, and after she died, it went to my oldest brother, whom I'll call Alec. A lot of death had touched that house. My grandmother died in the bedroom she shared with my grandfather. My great-grandfather passed away on a mattress my mother later slept on, although she placed a newer mattress over it. Several family dogs died there too, including my mother's little dog, Milo. There was also a man, someone I never knew, who died by suicide in the detached garage behind the laundry room. So the house had a long history of grief. Whether that matters or not, I can't say for certain. I only know that the atmosphere there sometimes felt crowded, even when nobody else was around. My grandparents were deeply religious. My mother grew up with religion being forced on her, and she rebelled against it as she got older. She became interested in spiritual practices that my grandparents would never have approved of. She also claimed she could sense things other people couldn't. Sometimes she saw figures. Sometimes she heard voices, and sometimes she simply knew that something was nearby. She once told me about a dream, or perhaps something more than a dream, in which two glowing shapes circled around her. They screamed horrible things at her, telling her to leave and threatening her. My mother didn't know what else to do, so she shouted back, "In the name of Jesus Christ and in the name of the Lord, leave this house." After one final scream, she woke up. She believed that was when everything truly began. At night, while she was lying in bed reading or watching videos, she would hear whispers close to her ears. Occasionally, she felt someone breathing against the side of her face. Other times, she felt fingers gripping her arm or shoulder. Strangely, the whispering didn't bother her very much. She would simply ignore it. But she hated being touched. One night, she felt something wrap its arms around her in what she described as a full embrace. She sat up and said, very firmly, "Touch me again, and I will make you leave." According to her, it never grabbed her again. There was another experience she remembered much more fondly. After injuring her hip, she woke during the night and felt someone carefully pulling the blanket over her legs, tucking it beneath her feet. She was convinced it was her grandfather looking after her. By then, my parents had divorced. My mother moved back into her childhood home with my grandparents. Later, Alec moved in as well. Whenever my other brother, whom I'll call Ander, and I stayed overnight, we slept in the same bedroom. There was a bunk bed against one wall and a mattress on the floor beside it. Alec usually took the floor mattress, while my mother and I shared the lower bunk. That room is where I had some of my worst experiences. The first happened during an ordinary afternoon. I was lying on the lower bunk with our dog Zoe curled near my feet. My mother, Alec, and my grandfather were all in the living room. My back was facing the bedroom door. It was a heavy wooden door. It didn't latch properly, but it still needed to be physically pushed open. A breeze couldn't move it. While I was lying there, I heard the door slowly creak open behind me. I assumed my mother or Alec was coming into the room. Nobody entered. Zoe stood up immediately, her ears lifted, and she stared toward the narrow space between the bed frame and Alec's mattress. I turned around. The door was continuing to open, inch by inch, but there was nobody standing behind it. Years earlier, my grandmother's cat used to push that door open whenever it wanted to sleep beside my mother. The door had opened almost exactly as far as it used to when the cat came inside. For a moment, I wondered whether that was what had happened. Then Zoe began growling. She wasn't staring at the doorway anymore. She was looking above the mattress, toward the dresser on the opposite side of the room. Her eyes tracked something I couldn't see. She paced along the edge of the bed, growling at the same empty spot. Then her growl became a frightened whine, and she ran out of the room. She left me there alone. My second experience is much harder to talk about. Even now, remembering it can bring tears to my eyes. I was spending the night at the house. Alec was sleeping on the mattress on the floor, while my mother and I were sharing the lower bunk. Ander wasn't there that night, so the upper bunk was empty. I was young and usually fell asleep before everyone else. My mother and Alec both struggled with insomnia, so they often stayed awake late into the night. At some point, probably around 3 or 4 in the morning, I woke up. I don't know what woke me. I checked the time, shifted beneath the blanket, and then looked toward the bedroom door. That was when I froze. Something was standing inside the room. The door was closed behind it. The bedroom was completely dark. The window had been covered with thick blankets, and every light in the house was off. Still, this figure looked darker than everything around it. It wasn't merely a shadow. It was a shape cut from a deeper kind of blackness. It was taller than the doorway. Its body was impossibly thin, almost like the bare branch of a dead tree. Its head was long and distorted, rising several inches above the top of the doorframe. And it had eyes. They glowed a dim, deep red. They weren't bright enough to illuminate its face, but they were bright enough for me to know it was looking directly at me. I could move. I remember that clearly. I pulled the blanket closer and tried to shrink into the bed. Then the figure lifted one arm. It reached toward me. Its arm was as thin as the rest of its body, and its hand ended in long, claw-like fingers. My mother and Alec were still asleep. Nobody else saw it. I did the only thing my frightened, younger self could think to do. I pulled the blanket over my head and told myself again and again that it was only a dream. I don't know how long I stayed under there. I don't know when I finally fell asleep again. People might say my imagination was playing tricks on me, and maybe it was. But I've always felt that I woke up because some part of me sensed it standing there. There was also the laundry room. It connected directly to the bedroom, but the washer and dryer had stopped working years earlier. After my grandmother died, my mother and Alec blocked the entrance with boxes, bags of clothing, and old furniture. One day, Alec was looking for something in the bedroom when he heard a growl coming from behind that clutter. No one else was in the room. My mother was sleeping in a hospital bed in the living room, with my grandfather and Zoe nearby. Alec described the sound as deep, rough, and almost human. He said it didn't sound like an animal growling randomly. It sounded deliberate, as though it was warning him. He tried to explain it away as a raccoon, a rat, or something moving inside the walls. But the fact that he told us about it at all meant it had frightened him. And that wasn't the only house where strange things happened. Before my parents divorced, we lived in another home. When I was still a toddler, my older brothers and a few cousins decided to use a Ouija board. I don't know whether the board was real or whether one of them moved the planchette as a joke. What I do know is that they became frightened and pulled their hands away without saying goodbye. Maybe that invited something into the house. Maybe it had already been there. A few years later, when I was 4 or 5, I often played alone in my bedroom. Nearly every day, I would glance toward the hallway and see a black figure rushing past my open door. It moved quickly, but never so quickly that I could completely dismiss it. I usually saw only a blur. Then, one afternoon, it stopped. My father was at work. Alec was playing video games in his room at the far end of the hall, and Ander was elsewhere in the house. I looked up from my toys and saw a little boy standing in my doorway. He appeared to be around 7 years old. He was completely black, with no visible face or clothing. He simply stood there, watching me. Because I was so young, I wasn't frightened at first. I thought perhaps one of my brothers had a friend visiting. I stood up and started walking toward him. The boy suddenly turned and ran down the hallway. I followed. The front door was at the end of that hallway, directly across from Alec's room. The screen door was old and extremely noisy. Nobody could enter or leave without the entire house hearing it. I went into Alec's room and asked who the boy was. He told me nobody else was there and ordered me to leave. I checked the front door, but I hadn't heard it open. I couldn't understand where the boy had gone. So my 4-year-old mind invented an explanation that somehow felt perfectly reasonable at the time. I decided that a family of shadow people lived inside our walls. Years later, I finally told my mother what I had seen. She became very quiet. Then, she told me her own story. While she and my father were still married, she had been lying in their bedroom reading. My father was at work. She heard a sound and looked toward the doorway. A little boy was standing there. At first, she thought it was Ander. She called his name. The boy instantly turned and ran down the hallway. My mother got up and searched the house. She found Alec and me asleep. When she finally checked Ander's bedroom, he was also asleep. Not lightly asleep either. She tried to wake him, but he was completely unresponsive in the way only a deeply sleeping child can be. The next morning, she questioned him. He insisted he had been in bed all night. The strangest part is that my father claimed he saw the boy too. My father never liked paranormal stories. He called them nonsense and avoided talking about anything supernatural. Alec was equally skeptical, yet both of them admitted that something unusual had happened in those houses. I don't know what any of it means. Maybe grief shaped the way we experienced those places. Maybe old houses make noises and tired minds turn shadows into figures. Maybe children see ordinary things and remember them as something impossible. Or maybe our family shared those homes with presences we never fully understood. I can't prove what I saw that night in my grandfather's bedroom. I can't prove that the little shadow boy was real. All I can tell you is that these memories have never faded. And sometimes, even now, when I wake unexpectedly in the middle of the night, I still look toward the doorway before I let myself move. All right, you want a ghost story? Well, this one isn't exactly about ghosts. And before I begin, I should warn you, it gets intense. I never believed in zombies. Not really. I thought they belonged in cheap movies and late-night video games. Then, about a year ago, something happened that changed my mind. I was waiting for the bus after school near an old cemetery. My grandmother was buried there, so when I found out my bus had been delayed for nearly half an hour, I decided to visit her grave. The trouble was, I couldn't remember exactly where it was. I wandered between rows of cracked headstones, going in circles beneath the twisted branches of the trees. The cemetery was unusually quiet. Even the birds had stopped making noise. That was when I noticed the ground moving. At first, I thought it was an animal burrowing beneath the soil. But the earth in front of one grave was rising and falling slowly, almost like something underneath it was breathing. The headstone was ancient. The name carved into it was Walt Olden, and according to the faded dates, he had been dead for more than a century. Then the soil began to rise. It didn't fall back down. Thin cracks spread across the dirt and, suddenly, a sickly green hand burst through the ground. I froze. A second hand appeared beside it, clawing at the soil. That was enough for me. I turned and ran toward the cemetery gates, but my foot caught on an empty bottle hidden in the grass. I fell hard, twisting my leg beneath me. Pain shot through my entire body. When I looked back, the thing had pulled its head out of the grave. Its eyes were sealed shut. Its mouth hung open, far wider than any human mouth should. Its skin was the color of rotting moss, and only one thin strand of black hair remained on its skull. It dragged itself free and began walking toward me. Slowly. Its eyes never opened, yet somehow it knew exactly where I was. I tried to stand, but my injured leg collapsed beneath me. Every time I pushed myself up, I fell again. The creature stretched its arms toward me and made a low, hollow groan. Then it whispered one word. Brains. I don't know how I managed it, but I finally got to my feet and limped through the cemetery gates. A young woman was walking inside. I grabbed the fence and shouted, "Don't go in there! There's something in the cemetery!" She laughed. She probably thought I was joking. Then the creature rose from behind a headstone and lunged at her. I hid behind a tree and called the police. I could hear screaming. Then silence. By the time the officers arrived, the creature had disappeared. They found the woman, but they didn't believe my story. They said I was confused because of the pain in my leg. That night, I woke up to a tapping sound against my bedroom window. Walt Olden was standing outside. His pale face was pressed close to the glass. His eyes were still shut, and his arms were raised toward me. "Brains," he whispered, again and again. "Brains, brains, brains." He stayed there until sunrise. The next night, there were 2 of them, then 3, then 5. Every night, more figures gathered outside my window. Men, women, even small shadowy shapes standing behind the taller ones. All of them had green skin, closed eyes, and a single strand of hair. Eventually, I recognized one of them. My grandmother. I tried to tell my parents, but whenever they looked outside, the figures became completely still. My parents thought they were Halloween decorations someone had placed in the garden as a prank. But I knew better. Recently, I looked through the curtains and saw hundreds of them crowded below my window. Walt stood at the front. This time, he was smiling. Not a normal smile. His mouth stretched from one side of his face to the other, revealing rows of dark, broken teeth. Then every zombie raised one hand and pointed toward my bedroom. I screamed. My mother rushed into the room and demanded to know why I was making so much noise. I begged her to look outside, but she only sighed. "Those decorations again?" she said. She opened the window. Cold air rushed into the room. Every figure below lifted its head at the exact same moment. My mother finally saw them move. She screamed and slammed the window shut. My father came running upstairs. For the first time, both of them believed me. We locked every door and covered every window, but the whispering continued outside. Brains. All night long. By morning, the garden was empty. We thought it was over. Then darkness came again. A few minutes ago, I heard something moving downstairs. Heavy footsteps. Slow breathing. And now, someone is climbing the stairs. So listen carefully. If you ever see an old grave where the soil looks like it's breathing, don't wait around to find out why. Just run. Because I can hear Walt outside my bedroom door now. And he isn't saying brains anymore. He's saying my name. Let me give you a little background first. I spent quite a few years working at sea, and around 4 years ago, I joined a repositioning voyage from Australia to Portugal. An older passenger and freight vessel had been purchased by a European shipping company, and our job was to bring her across. I joined the ship in Melbourne. We stayed alongside for nearly a month, getting everything ready, and the voyage itself took just over 5 months. We stopped at several ports along the way, and there were a few stretches when we had to remain docked for repairs. The ship was built for short Baltic crossings. She was designed to carry plenty of passengers and cargo, but she was never really meant to spend weeks at a time in open water. Honestly, it was remarkable that she held together for the entire journey. Near the end of the voyage, we were crossing the Atlantic when the chief officer gave me a strange little assignment. He wanted me to inspect every mattress on board, count them, and record their condition. It was an unusual job for a junior deck officer, but it was one of those tedious tasks that had been postponed for months. So between watches, I worked through the cabins while also checking fire extinguishers. There was a row of unused cabins on Deck 8, near the forward end of the accommodation block. I already disliked that area. The lights were weak, the corridors always felt colder than the rest of the ship, and there was a stale smell that never seemed to go away. One of those rooms was cabin 108. It was an interior cabin with no windows or portholes. When the lights were off, the darkness inside was complete. The moment I opened the door, I noticed the smell. It was difficult to describe. Something like melted wiring mixed with wet carpet. But the cabin itself was spotless. Not simply tidy, spotless. There was no dust on the furniture, no rust around the bathroom fittings, and the carpet looked cleaner than the carpets in the occupied cabins. That should have been reassuring, but somehow it made the room feel worse. As soon as I stepped inside, I felt deeply uncomfortable. I stopped in the middle of the cabin because every part of me seemed to be saying that something was wrong. It felt strangely familiar, almost like remembering a place I had never visited. I checked the first mattress and found a wide black stain running across the underside. I wrote it down, assuming it was mold or heat damage. While I was crouched beside the bed, the second bunk suddenly released from the wall. It swung down and struck me across the back of the head. I shouted, stumbled out of the room, and decided I had earned a cigarette. When I reached the upper deck, I realized I had left my safety helmet behind. I needed it to go outside, so I reluctantly headed back down. When I reached cabin 108, my helmet was sitting neatly on the floor outside the door. For a second, I thought I must have placed it there without remembering. But I knew I had not. I had left it inside the cabin, resting on top of the stained mattress. I was completely certain. Even more troubling, I had the only set of keys for that section. No one else should have been able to enter the room. I picked up the helmet and finished the inspection, but I could not shake the feeling that I had disturbed something. Over the next few weeks, I began having terrible dreams. I dreamed that I was sinking beneath dark water while something watched me from below. In other dreams, my skin was covered in damp black mold that would not wash away, no matter how hard I scrubbed. Even when I was awake, I sometimes had the sensation that someone was standing just behind me. Eventually, we reached Portugal. A professional cleaning crew came aboard to prepare the passenger cabins for service. Later that day, one of the cleaners reported that cabin 108 had been found in complete disorder. The bathroom floor was flooded. The mirror had fallen from the wall and shattered, and the stained mattress had somehow ended up on the opposite side of the room. None of the other cabins had been disturbed. I still do not know what was inside cabin 108, but whatever moved my helmet followed me into my dreams and tore that room apart. I do not believe it was trying to be helpful. I want to share a few experiences from my childhood that have stayed with me all these years. They were strange, unsettling, and sometimes frightening, but they felt completely real to me. One of my earliest memories happened sometime in the mid-1990s. It was the middle of the day, and I was standing in our living room when I noticed a man across from me. He was unusually tall, well over 2 meters, and stood slightly turned to one side. He wore clothing that reminded me of what rural Hungarian farmers might have worn in the 19th century. A wide-brimmed hat, a long dark coat, loose striped trousers tucked into heavy boots, and a thick mustache. His skin was pale, his hair was dark, and he looked to be somewhere in his 50s. What struck me most was how solid he appeared. He didn't look transparent or dreamlike. He looked like a real person standing inside our home, completely still, almost like a statue. Years later, I learned that my father had seen the same figure around that time. When he described the man, every detail matched what I remembered. My father also said the figure followed him with his eyes, as though it could see him and was aware of his presence. Another experience happened a couple of years later. I was walking along a quiet street with my mother when I noticed a man on the opposite side of the road. He was sweeping near the entrance of a house, but he was also crying and shouting. Suddenly, he threw the broom down and began pounding desperately on the door. He looked overwhelmed with grief. He was short but powerfully built, with broad shoulders, dark hair that reached almost to his neck, and a large mustache. He wore a striped shirt and faded trousers. I pointed toward him and told my mother, "There's a man over there crying and banging on the door." But she couldn't see anyone. Later, we told my father what had happened. When I described the man, my father immediately recognized him. He had known someone who looked exactly like that, but the man had died not long before I saw him. There was also a night, sometime during those same years, when I woke up and saw a glowing object floating in my bedroom. It was oval, bright white, and perhaps a little less than a meter wide. It remained suspended in one place, filling the room with light. At the same time, I heard a sharp buzzing sound and felt a powerful vibration pass through my entire body. I could feel it everywhere, from my head to my feet. The object didn't burn anything, leave marks, or physically harm me. Afterward, there was no evidence that it had ever been there. But the sound, the light, and the sensation were so intense that I have never forgotten them. The experience that frightened me most happened in the spring of 2004. I woke just before sunrise. The room was still dim, but enough morning light was coming through the window for me to see something standing at the far side of the room. It was watching me. Its body was shaped roughly like a human being, but it was clearly not human. It was thin and around average adult height. Its neck was long and strangely angular, and its head was covered in small ridges and uneven protrusions. Its eyes were enormous and pale, almost shield-shaped, with narrow vertical pupils. Instead of a normal nose, it had 2 small openings. Its mouth was little more than a thin line that curved downward, giving it a sad or troubled expression. Its skin was dark brown and seemed slightly wet or glossy. The fear I felt was immediate. I pulled the blanket over my head and lay there with my heart pounding so hard that I could hear it. After a moment, I slowly looked out. The creature was still there. It hadn't moved. It was simply standing in the same place, staring at me. I hid beneath the blanket again. When I finally gathered enough courage to look one more time, the room was empty. I still don't know what any of these experiences were. Perhaps there are explanations I haven't considered, but I know what I saw, and I know how real those moments felt. Even now, when I think back to that tall, silent man, the grieving figure by the doorway, the glowing object, and the creature watching me at dawn, I feel the same strange mixture of fear and wonder. They remain some of the most mysterious memories of my life. I've never really been the kind of person who posts things online. I don't follow conspiracy theories, I don't read ghost stories for fun, and I've never been someone who goes looking for strange things in the dark. But yesterday was my 15th birthday, and after what happened, I feel like I need to say this somewhere. I need someone to hear it. Ever since I was little, my aunt has visited me on my birthday, every single year. That part always seemed normal enough. Family comes over, people eat cake, everyone pretends time isn't doing its quiet little damage. But with my aunt, there was always one strange part. Every year, she would ask to spend 1 hour alone with me in her room. Exactly 1 hour. Not 50 minutes, not a little over. 1 hour. I used to think it was weird, but not in the way people might assume. She was never affectionate with me. Actually, she kept her distance most of the time, almost like she was afraid of standing too close. We'd sit there and talk about ordinary things at first. School, my mother, friends, whether I liked anyone. Then somehow, the conversation would always turn. She would start talking about deer, antlers, breath, long, soft sighs. I remember the sighs more than anything. The way she said that word made it feel heavier than it should have been. At the end of every hour, she would ask me to let her kiss my left cheek. She wore bright red lipstick, and it always left a mark. After that, we would open the Bible and read the part where Judas kisses Jesus on the cheek to identify him. Then we'd leave the room like nothing had happened. My mother would have dinner ready. We'd eat. They'd sing happy birthday. My aunt would say, "Goodbye, see you next year," and then she would leave. Except I don't think I ever actually saw her leave. I saw the door close. I heard the goodbye. But I never saw her walk down the hall or step out of the building. I know that sounds ridiculous. I know how it sounds. But it's true. Yesterday, the ritual happened again. This time, when she asked how I was, I told her the truth. I told her about a boy at school who had been saying horrible things about me. To my face, to his friends, behind my back. The usual kind of cruelty people call bullying when they want to make it sound smaller than it is. My aunt didn't react. She just looked at me and asked for his name. So I told her. That was all. She nodded, and we kept talking like normal. But when the hour ended, she didn't kiss my left cheek. She kissed my right. And this time, we didn't read from Matthew like we always did. We read from John. Not even the part about the kiss, because John doesn't tell it that way. I remember sitting there thinking how wrong it felt, like someone had moved one chair in a room I knew by heart. After that, everything went on as usual. Dinner, cake, singing, my aunt saying goodbye. The door closed. Then my mother got a phone call. The boy from school was dead. They said he'd had some kind of episode and taken his own life. At first, I couldn't connect it to anything. My brain just wouldn't let the pieces touch. I went to bed feeling sick and numb, and that was when I noticed the box sitting on my bed. It was wrapped beautifully. There was a note on top. "For you, with love from your Aunt Zizi." Inside was a small white rag doll. It was covered in lipstick marks. Red kisses, over and over, pressed into the cloth until the white fabric looked stained and wounded. Today at school, a couple of my friends showed me a photo that had been passed around. I wish they hadn't. I wish I'd looked away, because the marks on him looked just like the marks on the doll, and all I could think about was that kiss. Judas's kiss. I want to tell you about something that happened a few years ago, back when my life felt pretty settled. My fiancé and I were only a couple of months away from getting married. I had a steady job, a comfortable place to live, and honestly, things felt good. We didn't have kids yet, so I still had plenty of free time. Around that time, everyone was talking about new games, and I was spending a lot of evenings relaxing, gaming, and enjoying the quiet before married life really began. About a month before the wedding, my mom called and asked if I could house sit for her. She had to travel out of state for a work convention, and she'd be gone for about 5 days. Her house was small, easy to manage, and all she really needed me to do was keep an eye on the place, take care of her 2 little dogs, take out the trash, and make myself comfortable. It sounded easy enough. At the time, she lived in a quiet retirement community. She was just old enough to qualify, so the neighborhood was peaceful most of the time. Still, there had been a few break-ins reported a couple of streets over, so when I packed for the stay, I brought clothes, my handheld gaming system, a console, and a pistol. I know that probably sounds like too much, especially for a retirement community, but I figured it was better to be careful. The first couple of days were honestly nice. I'd go to work, come back in the afternoon, feed and play with the dogs, grab something easy for dinner, and spend the night gaming or chatting with friends. When it was time to sleep, I kept the TV on because I've never been great at relaxing in someone else's house. Background noise helped, so I'd put on gaming videos or old comedy episodes and let them run while I drifted off. I slept on the couch in the living room, even though my mom had told me I could use her bed. There were 2 reasons I didn't. First, she used these homemade laundry products that had a really strong, sweet smell. I respected her choices, but the scent bothered my sinuses and made my skin feel strange. The second reason was harder to explain. I did not like her bedroom. From the first time she moved into that house, something about that room felt wrong to me. Not ugly, not dirty, not unsafe in any obvious way. Just wrong. I remember helping her build furniture in there once while she was painting in the kitchen with music playing. It was bright outside. The curtains were open. Nothing scary was happening at all. But the entire time I was in that room, I felt this heavy pressure in my stomach, like I was somewhere I shouldn't be. I kept brushing it off because my mom loved the house and slept in that room every night without any problems. So I told myself it was just me being weird. The layout of the house was simple. The living room was at one end, the kitchen was in the middle, then a hallway with the bathroom, and finally my mom's bedroom at the far end. From the couch, if I looked to my left, I could see part of her bedroom doorway. It was only maybe 20 feet away. For the first 2 nights, nothing happened. Then came the 3rd night. I got home from work, picked up a pizza, played games for a while, and talked to my fiancé on the phone. Later, I curled up on the couch with the dogs and put something familiar on the TV. One of those shows I'd seen enough times that I could fall asleep to it without paying much attention. I had placed my pistol under the cushion near my pillow, hidden but close enough to reach. Again, I know that may sound extreme, but with the break-ins nearby, I wanted it within arm's reach. Eventually, I fell asleep. At first, I had one of those vague dreams where everything is gray and muffled. But then the dream changed. Suddenly, I was back in my mom's living room, lying on the couch exactly how I had fallen asleep. I could see the kitchen. I could see the dining table. I could even see the flickering light from the TV. Everything looked clear, almost too clear. I remember lying there, wondering if I was awake or dreaming. Then I noticed the bedroom door. It was wide open, and there was a man standing in the doorway. He was just standing there, staring at me. I couldn't see his face. I couldn't make out clothes or features. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and unnaturally still. The best way I can describe him is that he looked like a pitch-black mannequin with a smoky darkness around him. Everything else in the room looked sharp and real, but he looked like a hole cut into the world. For a moment, I didn't feel afraid. I think part of my brain was still trying to convince me it was only a dream. Then I noticed the TV. The sound was clear. The picture was clear. It wasn't muffled like dreams usually are for me. I could actually make out what was happening on the screen. And then I felt my hand tighten around the pistol. I don't remember reaching for it. I don't remember deciding to move. I just suddenly became aware that my hand was already gripping it. The instant my fingers wrapped around the handle, the man charged. He sprinted straight toward me, not around the hallway, not through the normal space of the house. He came forward so fast it felt impossible, like he was cutting through the walls themselves. In less than a second, he would have been right on top of me. I screamed. My body reacted before my mind caught up. I sat straight up and aimed the pistol toward the hallway. But by then, he was gone. Just gone. The bedroom doorway was empty. The hall was empty. The house was quiet except for the TV. The dogs had woken up and were looking at me like they had no idea what had just happened. I sat there frozen, heart pounding, arms still outstretched, trying to understand whether I had just dreamed it or whether something had really been standing there. After a while, I got up and turned on every light I could reach. I aimed down the hallway, even though part of me knew how ridiculous it sounded to point a gun at something that might not have been human. But in that moment, I wasn't thinking clearly. I was scared. My mom's bedroom door was open. I still don't know whether I had left it that way or not. I didn't go down the hallway. I couldn't make myself do it. I sat back down on the couch with the dogs and stared toward that dark part of the house for the rest of the night. I tried to let the TV distract me, but it didn't work. Every little sound made my nerves tighten. At some point, I must have fallen asleep, because the next thing I remember was waking up to my alarm at 6 in the morning. I didn't shower that day because the bathroom was too close to the bedroom. All day at work, I kept thinking about it. I kept asking myself if it had been a dream. Maybe it was. Maybe my brain had stitched together the house, the TV, and my discomfort with that bedroom into one awful nightmare. But it didn't feel like a dream. And the worst part was thinking about my mom living there. I was only staying for a few nights. She had to sleep in that house every day. For the last 2 nights, I kept every light on. When I got back before dark, I forced myself to go into the hallway and turn on the bedroom light too. Daylight made me braver. Not much, but enough. Nothing else happened. When my mom came back, I called her during my lunch break and told her everything. I described the man, the doorway, the way he ran at me, and how real it felt. My mom is religious, and she's always believed there are things in the world we don't fully understand. She took me seriously right away. After that, she contacted the woman who had owned the house before her and asked a few careful questions. That woman told her that she and her husband had lived there together. Then my mom asked if her husband had died in the house. The woman said yes. He had died in the bedroom. Apparently it had been a sudden heart attack, a bad one. My mom was not happy after that. She had never seen anything herself, but she didn't like the thought that something might be lingering in her home. She didn't call an exorcist or do anything dramatic. She just prayed. A lot. That was her way of handling it. And strangely enough, nothing ever happened again. A few months later, I watched the house for her one more time, just for a day, and I didn't see anything. But even then, whenever I got close to that bedroom, that same heavy feeling came back. That same sense that I should not go in there. Eventually, my wife and I had our first child, and we moved to a larger place with some land. My mom sold that house and moved into a small place on our property so she could be close to her grandchild. Since then, there haven't been any more strange experiences. I still don't know what happened that night. Maybe it was a nightmare. Maybe I woke up halfway inside a dream. Or maybe there really was something standing in that bedroom doorway, watching me from the dark. I can't prove it either way. But I know how it felt. And I know I'll never forget the way that shadow ran at me. Hey, I want to share a story a good friend of mine told me. It's one of those tales that really sends a chill down your spine. It didn't happen to me, but I trust this friend completely. She's one of the most grounded people I know, no nonsense, so I believe every word she said. This took place late one night when we both worked at a nursing home. She went into a patient's room to give medication, but the moment she stepped into the doorway, she stopped dead in her tracks. The patient was sitting up in bed, but what caught her eye was that the patient wasn't alone. Sitting at the foot of the bed was this figure, completely cloaked in black. It wasn't human, that was clear. What's eerie is that both the patient and this dark figure turned to look at her, but she couldn't make out any facial features except for this enormous, unsettling smile. It freaked her out so much that she literally ran out and grabbed another nurse to come back with her. When they returned, the patient was still sitting up, but alone. The patient said something like, "You scared my friend. He's hiding in the closet." My friend didn't dare look in there. She thinks it might have been some kind of angel of death, because the patient was declining and passed away a few weeks later. It's a haunting story, and even after all these years, it still sticks with me. I'm 23 now, but this happened back when I was in 4th grade. And just to give you a little context, weird paranormal stuff wasn't exactly new to me by then. Before this, I'd already had a few strange experiences when I was living at my grandmother's house. Apparently, I had an imaginary friend there, except I don't actually remember having one. My cousins remember it though. They still tell me stories about how I used to make them play games with this so-called friend, and how badly it scared them. But I swear, I have zero memory of any of that. I do remember other things though. I remember my dolls turning their heads when nobody touched them. I remember seeing shadows move around. And I remember this one really unsettling moment when my late grandfather's favorite song randomly started playing on our old computer, while his ashes were sitting on the shelf right above it. As a kid, that absolutely terrified me. Eventually, my mom and I moved out of my grandma's house and into an apartment. She was a single mom, so it was just the two of us. We lived on the 3rd floor, and the apartment directly below us stayed empty the entire time we lived there. Maybe that didn't mean anything, but when you're a kid, an empty apartment under you feels like it has teeth. I didn't hate that place exactly, but it always felt off. The worst part was my bedroom. At night, I would see these pale, floating shapes drifting across my ceiling. They looked like soft white blobs, just moving slowly around up there. I know that sounds strange, but I'm only telling you what I saw. I was so scared that I kept running out of my room and crawling into bed with my mom. One night, she finally got tired of me taking over half the bed, so she decided to sleep in my room instead. And that was the night she saw them too. The same white shapes floating across my ceiling. After that, she contacted this woman my aunt knew. I don't really know what to call her. A spiritual healer, a medium, an energy reader, something like that. I honestly still don't know what her actual title was. But before she came over, she told my mom not to tell her anything about what I'd been seeing. She wanted to come in without knowing any details. Now here's the part that has stayed with me the most. A few weeks before that woman came over, I had a sleepover with 2 friends. I'll call them Jame and Jordan. They were twins. I was mostly friends with Jame, but Jordan always had to come along because their parents didn't let them go anywhere separately. The 3 of us were sleeping on my bedroom floor. Our heads were against the wall, facing into the room. Jame was in the middle. Jordan was closest to the door, and I was closest to the window. At some point in the middle of the night, I woke up and opened my eyes. There was a woman standing in my doorway. Not a shadow, not a dream, not sleep paralysis. A woman. She looked like she may have been indigenous or Latina. Her clothes looked old-fashioned, almost like something from a very old painting. The kind of clothing you'd imagine from centuries ago. But the part I remember most clearly was her face. She was looking directly at me. She slowly walked from my bedroom doorway all the way across the room toward the window, never breaking eye contact with me. I just lay there completely frozen, watching her move. Then I squeezed my eyes shut as hard as I could. When I opened them again, she was gone. Fast forward to the day the spiritual woman came to our apartment. She walked through the whole place, burning sage, talking about the energy in the rooms, doing whatever it was she did. Eventually, the three of us ended up sitting on the kitchen floor. It was just me, my mom, and this woman. We were sitting there talking when, out of nowhere, the room started smelling absolutely horrible. And then this woman suddenly jumped up. She was clutching herself, panicking, and when I looked down, there was a puddle of liquid poop on the kitchen floor. I wish I was joking. This grown woman had literally had diarrhea right there on our kitchen floor. She ran straight to the bathroom while my poor mom was left cleaning actual human diarrhea off the floor. And I'm just sitting there, 10 years old, trying to process how the night had gone from spiritual cleansing to whatever fresh nightmare this was. A few minutes later, the woman came out of the bathroom looking genuinely shaken. And she said, "I saw it." According to her, while she was in the bathroom, she saw the entity that had been attached to me. I don't remember every single thing she said after that, because honestly, my brain was still stuck on the fact that she had just pooped on our kitchen floor. But I do remember one thing very clearly. She told my mom there was also a large cat protecting me. A black panther. My mom immediately reacted and said something along the lines of, "That makes sense. I've always prayed for a black panther to watch over her and protect her." And there was no way this woman could have known that. To this day, I still don't fully know what happened in that apartment. I don't know who I saw walking across my room. I don't know what that woman saw in the bathroom. I don't know why my mom and I both saw those white floating shapes on my ceiling. But I do know this. I'm 23 now, and I have a black panther tattooed on my arm. I got it when I was 17, and I have never regretted it for even 1 second. Maybe the whole thing sounds ridiculous. Maybe it is ridiculous. But whenever life gets heavy, or whenever I just need to laugh at how completely unreal that night was, I think about it again. Because honestly, what was that? And now this panther is right there on my arm, not hidden at all, so people ask me about it all the time. The tattoo is gorgeous, by the way. The artist did an incredible job with every little detail. But when people ask me why I got it, I usually just say, it's kind of a long story, but basically, it's my spiritual guardian. Because really, how am I supposed to explain the full version? Nobody is ready for the kitchen floor part. Hey, I want to share something a little strange that happened recently with my toddler, and honestly, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. So, you know how people often say little kids can sometimes sense things adults can't, like spirits or energies? Well, this morning I was putting laundry away in my little guy's room. His closet door was wide open, and I was facing it, so I couldn't see his window directly, but I could peek through the little gap near the door hinge. If I leaned in just right, I could get a pretty clear view of the space in front of his window. It sounds silly, but perspective mattered here. Anyway, as I was folding clothes, I started hearing giggles and the kind of excited cooing only a 1-year-old can make. Curious, I looked through the door gap and saw the curtain by the window move like someone was wrapping it around themselves, almost hiding. I got closer to the hinge and saw my son standing about a foot from the window, laughing and staring right at the curtain. For about 5 seconds, I watched the curtain shift again, wrapping like it was concealing someone. Then, my little guy walked right up to it. I turned away to hang more laundry, thinking maybe his older brother was playing hide and seek with him. They do that all the time. But here's the thing. When I finished, switched off the lights, and called both my sons to come out, I saw the 5-year-old sprawled on the couch, watching TV. There was no way he'd snuck out unnoticed, meaning my toddler was alone at the window the whole time. So, was my son playing with a spirit? Or was I imagining that curtain moving? I should mention there's a small fan running in his room 24/7, but it's nowhere near strong enough to move those thick blackout curtains like that, much less wrap them around like someone hiding. Plus, our house is fairly new, and no one's ever passed away here or nearby. I don't know what to make of it, but it's been on my mind. Maybe sometimes children do see things adults can't. Or maybe it's just one of those unexplained moments we don't have answers for. Either way, it's a story I'll keep close. I've kept this story to myself for a long time, mostly because even now, when I think back on it, I get that same tight feeling in my chest that I had that night. This happened about 7 years ago. I was walking home from my friend Mara's place after we'd stayed up way too late talking. It was close to 12:40 in the morning, maybe a little after that, and instead of taking the main road, I decided to cut through Briar Lane, this narrow, quiet stretch that ran alongside an old pasture. I'd used that shortcut plenty of times before. In daylight, it was nothing special. Just cracked pavement, a leaning fence, and a wide open field that always looked kind of silver under the moon. But that night felt different. It was too quiet. Not peaceful quiet, more like the whole world had paused and forgotten to breathe. No cars passing, no wind moving through the grass, no crickets, nothing. About halfway down the road, I noticed someone standing by the fence at the edge of the field. At first, I thought it was just another person out late, maybe someone taking a walk or waiting for a ride. But the closer I got, the less sense that made. They weren't walking. They weren't shifting their weight. They weren't looking around. They were just standing there, facing me. I couldn't see their face. It was too dark for that. But I could tell they were tall. Not just tall in the usual way. Strange tall. Stretched tall. I tried to act normal. I kept my eyes on the road and told myself not to make a big deal out of it. Just keep walking. Don't stare. Don't let your imagination start building monsters out of shadows. But when I reached the spot where they'd been standing, I glanced over. They were gone. I stopped right there in the road. There was nowhere for them to go. The field was open, flat, and empty for a long way. There were no trees close enough to hide behind, no sheds, no houses, no dips in the ground. One moment they had been there, and a few seconds later, they weren't. I remember standing there with this cold feeling crawling up my back, trying to convince myself I had imagined it. I was tired. It was late. Maybe it had been a fence post, or a trick of the light, or my brain making something out of nothing. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Soft but clear. Step, step, step. I turned around fast. Nobody was there. The road behind me was empty, and the footsteps stopped the second I turned. I waited, holding my breath, listening so hard my ears almost hurt. Nothing. So I started walking again. And the footsteps started again too. This happened more than once. I'd walk, and they'd follow. I'd stop, and they'd stop. Every time, the road behind me was empty. By then, I wasn't pretending to be calm anymore. I pulled out my phone, turned on the flashlight, and aimed it behind me. The beam shook in my hand, but there was nothing there. Just the road, the fence, and that black field sitting quietly beside me. I started walking faster. The footsteps matched me. That was the worst part. Not that they were loud. Not that they were running. Just that they kept pace. Like whoever, or whatever, was behind me knew exactly how fast I was moving. I didn't look back again after that. I just kept going, telling myself that once I got home, everything would feel normal again. When I finally saw my house, I almost cried from relief. I hurried to the gate, fumbled with the key, got inside, and turned to close it. That's when I looked down the street one last time. Someone was standing at the far end of the road, completely still. Even from that distance, I could tell it was the same figure. Tall, thin, and darker than everything around it. Not standing in the dark, exactly. More like it was made from a piece of darkness that had peeled itself away from the night. I slammed the gate shut and ran inside. I barely slept. I kept telling myself there had to be a normal explanation. A real person. A prank. A strange coincidence. Anything but what it felt like. The next afternoon, I was outside when my neighbor, Mr. Callan, came over. He looked uncomfortable, like he wasn't sure whether he should say anything. Then he asked, "Were you out late last night?" I told him I was. He nodded slowly and said he'd been awake around 1 in the morning and had looked out his window. He said he saw me coming down the road. Then he asked, "Who was walking behind you?" My stomach just dropped. I hadn't told him anything. I hadn't told anyone. I still don't know what happened that night. Maybe there really was a person on Briar Lane. Maybe fear filled in the blanks after I saw something I couldn't explain. But I know what I heard. And according to my neighbor, I wasn't walking home alone. Hey there, I want to share a story from last fall that's stuck with me ever since. So, I'm an HVAC and electrical contractor, and I often work with realtors fixing up homes that are in escrow. This particular day, it was already dark by 4:30 p.m., which is typical for late fall. We were at this empty house. Lights were on, but no one was around. My assistant and I were there to replace the furnace. Right away, he mentioned feeling this strange, heavy vibe in the house. I felt it too, like something just wasn't right. The house was about 30 years old, in a pretty standard neighborhood in the North Valleys of Reno, Nevada. I remember saying a couple of times in the afternoon that I thought I heard footsteps down the hallway. My helper admitted he heard them too, but didn't say anything. As we wrapped up, he suddenly pointed down the hall. We both saw it, a translucent figure of a man, waist up only, walking into the front bedroom. It was so clear. My helper called out, "Hey, you're not supposed to be here." We checked the room thoroughly, windows locked, nothing out of place. We looked all over the house, but we were alone. Needless to say, we packed up fast and called it a day. I don't think I've ever locked up a house that quickly. The next day, I called the real estate agent to let him know we finished and that the inspection was scheduled for the following week. I asked about the house's history. He told me the previous owner's daughter was selling the place. Apparently, her mother had passed away there that spring, and a few months later, her father took his own life in the bedroom. He then mentioned that his client had seen her father in the house while cleaning it out, and thought maybe she was a little crazy. I just chuckled uneasily and never told him what we saw. But you know, sometimes places hold onto the memories of those who lived and left there. I still think about that figure in the hallway. Maybe it was just a lingering presence saying goodbye. I must have been about 10 when my mom took me into this little charity shop one afternoon. I remember wandering around, not really looking for anything, and then I saw it. A pale wooden rocking chair. For some reason, I was completely drawn to it. I know how that sounds now. A child becoming obsessed with an old rocking chair in a charity shop is already the beginning of a horror film. But at the time, I didn't think there was anything strange about it. I just wanted it. My mom bought it for me, and I was over the moon. My parents carried it upstairs and put it in the corner of my bedroom, and after that, I sat in it all the time. I'd rock back and forth while reading, while daydreaming, while doing absolutely nothing. My brother Jame wanted it too, but I'd seen it first, so as far as I was concerned, it was mine. A few weeks later, I went to bed like normal. Back then, I was scared of the dark, so I always left my bedroom door open a little. My parents would keep the hallway light on, and that bit of light would spill into my room. It wasn't bright, but it was enough that I could make out the shapes of my furniture. Sometime during the night, I woke up. At first, I didn't move. I was facing the wall, and I could hear this soft, creaking sound behind me. The rocking chair. It was moving. I thought it must have been Jame sneaking into my room to sit in it, because he was always trying to use it when I wasn't looking. So I said something like, "Jame, get out, I'm trying to sleep." No answer. Just that slow creak. Back and forth. Back and forth. I turned over, annoyed more than anything. And then I froze. There was someone in the chair, but not a whole person. It was just a head. A man's head. He had dark brown hair, brown eyes, and he was staring straight at me. Not blinking, not moving, just looking at me from the rocking chair in the corner of my room. I have never felt fear like that. I wanted to shout for my mom and dad, but nothing came out. My body felt locked in place. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't even pull the covers over my face properly. I just lay there with the duvet up to my mouth, staring at him while he stared back at me. In my head, I started counting down from 10. I told myself, when I get to 1, I'm going to pull the pillow over my head. 10, 9, 8, all the way down to 1. But when I got there, I couldn't do it. So I started again, and again, and again. I must have counted down dozens and dozens of times before I finally found the nerve to grab the pillow, pull it over my head, and squeeze my eyes shut as tightly as I could. I didn't look back at the chair for the rest of the night. At some point, I must have fallen asleep, because the next thing I remember is waking up in the morning feeling completely wrong. Not ill exactly, just strange. Like something had shifted in the room, or in me. I told my parents what had happened, and they took the rocking chair out of my bedroom that same day. I was relieved, honestly. I never wanted to sit in it again. But the part that still gets to me happened years later. I was at my Nana's house, and we were going through some old family photographs. We didn't visit her house all that often, so I hadn't really seen many of those pictures before. I picked one up, and my stomach just dropped. It was him. The same dark hair, the same eyes, the same face I'd seen in that rocking chair. I asked who the man in the photo was. It was my granddad. I'd never met him. I'd never even seen a picture of him before. He died when my mom was still a teenager, after taking his own life. After that, I didn't want to look through the photos anymore. Even now, I don't know what I saw that night. The thing that haunts me most isn't just that I saw him. It's that I only saw part of him. Not a shadowy figure, not a full body standing in the corner, not some misty shape. Just a head, sitting there in that old rocking chair, staring at me. I've heard people talk about ghosts, shadow figures, and things moving around at night, but I haven't heard many people say they saw only part of someone. And honestly, I still wonder about it. Was it my imagination? Was it a dream? Was it something else entirely? I don't know. But I know what I saw. Hey, I want to share a little story from when I was a kid, maybe around 9 or so. I was home alone one evening, sitting in our living room that kind of flowed into the kitchen. The TV was off, and I happened to catch my reflection in the dark screen. It was one of those moments where you look and think, wow, that looks kind of spooky. I was fiddling with a toy or something, completely absorbed, when the sun started to set, and suddenly it got really dark. All the lights were off, which was strange because there were usually 4 other people in the house: my mom, dad, older sister, and grandma. So it was never this quiet or dark. What I didn't know was that everyone else had quietly left the house without telling me. Then, out of the silence, I heard it. A slow, steady sound of high heels clicking on the floor, coming from the kitchen. The footsteps were deliberate and getting closer, louder with each step. It felt really eerie, like something not good was coming toward me. I was frozen for a moment, heart pounding, and then I just ran as fast as I could, up the stairs into the pitch-black hallway. The only light was sneaking out from under my grandma's bedroom door. Without thinking twice, I burst in and jumped into bed beside her, safe but still shaking. That invisible woman in high heels never came near me again after that night. Although, I swear, sometimes I'd hear soft singing through the vents later on, like she was trying to spook me in her own way. But that's a story for another time. I guess the best way to say this is, I think the house we moved into might be haunted. And I know how that sounds, I really do. I'm not saying that because I want advice, or because I'm panicking, or because I think I'm in danger. Honestly, I'm not even that scared. A little nervous sometimes, sure, especially when the lights are off and the house starts acting like it has opinions. But mostly, I'm just fascinated by it. We moved into this 2-story rental in early spring. It's not ancient or anything. It was probably built sometime in the 80s or maybe the early 90s. The place has that classic landlord renovation charm. Paint where paint should not be. Trim that gives up before reaching the wall. Window screens that fit like they were installed by someone guessing from memory. But overall, it's a good house. The appliances work. The electricity is fine, except for one flickering bulb I refuse to count as spooky evidence. The heating and air are fine. The water pressure is great. There's nothing dramatic in the house's history, at least not that I know of. I live with 3 roommates who I'll call Dev, Hallie, and Tay. Tay's cat moved in a few weeks after we did, and honestly, she has become one of the better witnesses in this whole thing. The weirdness started almost immediately. On our second day there, Tay and I heard what sounded like people talking downstairs. Not one person mumbling, a whole quiet conversation. At least 3 voices, low and hushed, coming from the kitchen area. Then we heard the garage door open and close. We thought Dev and Hallie were back from picking up more stuff from the old place. But when we went to check, the garage was empty. No car in the driveway, no people, no sign that anyone had come in. Then came the stomping upstairs. That was when Tay found this hidden attic entrance near the laundry area, and for a minute we both thought, absolutely not, we have squatters. The house is on the edge of a rougher part of town, the kind of area where most of the businesses nearby have bars on the windows, so it didn't feel impossible. We checked everything. Every room, every closet, every corner. The attic entrance didn't even lead to a real usable attic, at least not from what we could tell. It was more like a narrow, vertical wooden shaft going up toward the roof. Nobody could have been living up there. Nobody could have slipped in and out. I even put a camera in the upstairs hallway for a while, but it never caught anything. That same evening, my closet doors started opening and slamming shut by themselves. They're sliding doors, heavy and kind of stubborn on their tracks. There was no breeze. No one was near them. And they weren't just drifting open. They were moving hard, harder than I think I could have moved them from where I was standing. It happened several times over maybe 10 minutes, and then it stopped, like someone had gotten bored. For a little while after that, nothing major happened. Then one night, I woke up and my bedroom door was open. It hadn't been locked, but it had been fully latched. Everyone else was asleep. Nobody admitted to opening it, and honestly, I believed them. That happened once more later on. Around then, Tay and I started hearing the knocking. That's probably the most regular thing now. It usually happens late at night, somewhere between 2 and 6 in the morning. At first, we tried to explain it away as pipes, because that's what reasonable people do before admitting their house might be playing percussion. But we figured out the sounds came from 2 specific spots: the middle of the upstairs bathroom floor and the kitchen floor near the garage door. And it doesn't sound like pipes. It sounds like knuckles. A bare fist knocking on tile upstairs and on wood downstairs. I tested it myself, tapping the same way with my own hand, and the sound matched almost perfectly. The stranger part is that sometimes it seems to respond. I know how that sounds. But certain words seem to get reactions. The word ghost almost always earns a knock or two, which feels less like a haunting and more like someone interrupting a conversation to say, "Yes, hello, present." After that, the activity became a pattern. Knocking, doors opening or closing, sometimes softly, sometimes with force. Occasionally, it sounded like someone was walking on the roof at night. We checked the house. We checked outside. No sign of anyone. And sound travels so easily in this place that I really don't think a person could hide here without us knowing. Most of it happens around the laundry room, the kitchen, and my bedroom. My room is right next to the laundry room, with the bathroom on the other side. It's like the whole upstairs hallway is a little paranormal intersection. Then, a couple of weeks ago, it got stronger. By then, the cat was living with us, and she reacts to the noises too. That actually made me feel a little better, weirdly. At least Tay and I weren't just winding each other up. The cat will freeze, stare, jump, or bolt right when the sounds happen. I also started seeing shadows. Not often, just quick glimpses. Always upstairs in the hallway or downstairs near the kitchen. The upstairs ones seem to come from the bathroom area. They look tall but hunched, and they're never visible for more than a second or two. Sometimes I hear shuffling when they move. Downstairs, they seem to duck behind furniture or vanish near the tiny bathroom under the stairs. Tay may have seen one once too, though I'm not completely sure. Dev and Hallie don't notice nearly as much as we do, but Tay, the cat, and I have definitely had enough experiences to make the house feel very crowded for a place with 4 humans in it. What finally made me want to talk about it was what happened tonight. I was getting ready for bed and leaving the bathroom to go to my room. The hallway lights were off, but Dev had put these color-changing fairy lights along the little wall by the stairs, so it wasn't completely dark. I didn't see anything, but when I reached my bedroom doorway, I suddenly felt like someone was standing behind me. So I waved. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I figured if something was there, I might as well be polite. The second I waved, there was this loud grinding sound right in front of my face. It sounded like metal scraping against stone, except it came from empty air. Immediately after that, I heard footsteps running toward me. Fast footsteps, human footsteps. But there was nothing there. The cat was about a foot away from me, and she bolted into Tay's room the moment the sound happened. The footsteps stopped right in front of me, and then nothing else happened. No figure, no touch, no dramatic movie moment. Just the house going silent again. So I went into my room and shut the door, because apparently that is who I am now. Something invisible runs at me in the hallway, and I just decide bedtime is still happening. For about 20 minutes after that, I heard shuffling and scraping right outside my door. The doorknob moved a little, but the door didn't open. I tried to record it, but every time I picked up my phone, the sound stopped. That has happened before. The second a camera comes out, everything gets shy. Eventually, I lay down and left my bedside lamp on. I wasn't terrified exactly, but the energy felt different, more agitated than usual. Before tonight, most of it felt startling, but not threatening. This felt like something had been annoyed by my little wave. I tried to convince myself the sounds outside the door were just the cat, even though they sounded more like feet and fabric shifting. I was about to turn the lamp off when I heard the same shuffling directly under my bed. I turned on my phone flashlight and looked underneath. Nothing. Just my toolbox, a keyboard, and an empty moving bag. No cat. Nothing moving. Nothing that could have made the sound. And of course, the noise stopped as soon as I tried to record it. Eventually, things quieted down, except for a few taps on the wall. But then my room got cold. Not slightly chilly. Cold. The thermostat said it was around 70, but my room felt closer to the low 50s. I had goosebumps, and the cold just stayed there. So yeah, I think I might live in a haunted house. I'm still not convinced it's evil. Annoyed, maybe. Restless. Frustrated. Maybe just dramatic and very committed to knocking. But not malicious. At least, not so far. And honestly, part of me hopes it really is paranormal. If it weren't for those closet doors moving the way they did, I'd probably still be trying to blame the pipes, the house settling, or the cat being chaotic in ways unknown to science. But deep down, I feel like something is here. And strangely enough, I don't think I hate that. You know, I grew up in this cozy little bungalow from the time I was about 3 until I was 14. It was pretty modest. 3 small bedrooms lined up down a hallway that led right into the living room. We had a finished basement, and there was this one concrete room down there meant for cold storage. Now, that room, it absolutely terrified me as a kid. Whenever the door was left open, I swear I saw shadows, like a figure, maybe human-shaped, just watching me. I was too scared to even get close, and if I did, I'd break down crying. Whenever my parents went down there, I'd stand at the top of the stairs, screaming and pleading with them to stay away from that room and come back upstairs. Upstairs, my bedroom was just across a tiny hallway from my parents'. At night, I refused to walk down that hallway in the dark. My mom told me I used to wake up in the middle of the night, screaming and begging her to come sleep with me so the shadows wouldn't get me. In the living room, while playing or watching TV, I'd catch glimpses out of the corner of my eye of this older couple dressed in clothes that looked like they were from the 1800s. The man wore a top hat and a suit that was shorter in the front and longer in the back, and the woman had on a wide, flowing dress with a corset top. They'd pace slowly back and forth down the hallway, pausing for a few seconds before turning around. But every time I turned my head to get a better look, they vanished. Until we moved when I was 14, I refused to be alone in that house. There was this constant, heavy feeling of being watched that I just couldn't shake. I'd wait out in the backyard for hours until my dad got home from work, just so I wouldn't have to be inside alone. And the moment we moved, all those feelings and my terrible night terrors stopped completely. Fast forward about 10 years. I was having lunch with my mom and her best friend when we started talking about that old house. I told my mom about how creepy it felt growing up there, though I tried to laugh it off as just a kid's wild imagination looking back on it. Then, my mom surprised me. She said she'd felt those same eerie things and had odd experiences there too, but never told me because she didn't want to scare me. She described seeing the same old couple walking down the hallway. We ended up finishing each other's sentences as we described them, and it was almost like we were talking about the exact same pair. She even told me that while I was at school, a priest used to come by every few months to bless the house. I still consider myself a bit of a skeptic, but honestly, it's hard to explain how my mom and I saw the same couple without ever mentioning them to each other. It's one of those childhood mysteries that still makes me pause and wonder. Hi everyone. I'm reaching out because I honestly don't know how to make sense of what has been happening with my mother. This has been building for years now, and it feels like I've been carrying it around quietly for so long that I don't even know where to begin. About 8 years ago, I started having these really vivid dreams that my mother was going to die. At first, I tried to ignore them. I told myself dreams are just dreams. But then they happened again and again, maybe 3 or 4 times, and they felt so real that I got scared. I told my mom about them, but she brushed it off. At the time, she was healthy. She had barely ever been sick in her life, and there was no obvious reason for anyone to be worried. Then, slowly, things started changing. She began having health problems no one could properly explain. Her legs started swelling badly. She lost weight. Her strength began fading. This went on over several years, starting before the pandemic, and then everything seemed to get worse after that. Eventually, she became so weak that she dropped to around 36 kilos and had to spend weeks in intensive care. She was being fed through IV support because normal food just did not seem to help her body recover. We tried everything we could think of: doctors, priests, spiritual people, house cleansing, prayers, all of it. Nothing really changed in any lasting way. After she came home from the hospital, she improved a little physically. She gained some weight back and reached around 45 or 46 kilos. But then a new problem started, and in some ways it has been even harder to live with. Her behavior changed. Over the last couple of years, she has become harsh, angry, and verbally abusive. She goes through huge amounts of soap and wipes every single day. She cleans for hours, washes things repeatedly, and spends money on these items like there is no limit. She refuses to eat properly. She does not take her medicine consistently. Anytime someone asks her about it, she snaps back as if nobody has the right to question her. What makes it more confusing is that around outsiders, she can act completely normal. She hides all of these habits when other people are watching. So from the outside, nobody really sees what we deal with at home. My father does not really confront her. He keeps buying what she asks for and avoids challenging her behavior. I know he may be tired too, but it feels like his silence has allowed everything to keep getting worse. I feel angry at him for that, even though part of me knows this whole situation is probably bigger than him too. I have started pulling away from my mother. I barely interact with her now, and the hardest part is that I used to love being close to her. I used to really love my mom. But now, when I look at her, it feels like the person I knew is gone and someone else is living in her place. Part of me wonders if this is mental illness. Part of me wonders if something spiritual or dark is involved. And part of me is just exhausted and wants to cut her off completely so I can stop feeling trapped in this. She refuses to see psychologists properly. She avoids medication. She will not admit anything is wrong. I feel like I am standing in front of a locked door, knocking until my hands hurt, while the person inside pretends not to hear me. So I'm asking honestly, what can be done in a situation like this? Is this illness, something spiritual, or both? And how do I accept that someone I loved so much now feels like a stranger in my own home? Hey, I want to share a story that's been on my mind for a while. It happened one night when I was about 14, and my little cousin, who's my aunt's oldest kid, around 6 back then, was staying over. It was late, like 1 a.m., and we were both awake in the living room watching TV. Suddenly, I needed to use the bathroom, so I got up. But right before I left, she grabbed my arm so tightly and pleaded with me not to leave her alone. I told her it'd be super quick, just a minute. When I came back, she was hiding under the blanket with tears streaming down her face. She pointed silently at the front window. So I looked outside, but there was nothing there. I sat back down next to her, and eventually, we both fell asleep. The next day, my brother, cousins, and I went to visit my mom and her boyfriend and told them about what happened. They gave us some sage to clear the house. I told them about what my cousin saw, and when my mom's boyfriend gently asked her about it, she just whispered something to him and started crying uncontrollably. We never pushed her to talk about it again because we didn't want to upset her more. She's 10 now, and sometimes I think about asking her if she still remembers. What breaks my heart the most is that she begged me not to leave her alone, but I did anyway, and she had to face whatever it was by herself. Thankfully, we're out of that house now. It's one of those moments that stays with you, you know? I'm a doctor in southern Brazil, and I've worked in the public health system long enough to think I'd built a pretty thick wall around myself. You see a lot in this job. Too much, honestly. You learn to stay calm, to trust the labs, to follow the protocols, to keep your feet planted on the floor even when everything around you feels like it's falling apart. But there was a case last month that still hasn't left me alone. It was a 13-year-old boy. I'll call him Matthias. That wasn't his real name, but it's close enough. He came in with what looked like a textbook case of leptospirosis. High fever, yellowing eyes, muscle pain, weakness, the whole pattern. We ran the tests, confirmed it, and admitted him right away. He was scared, of course. His mother was terrified. But he fought. For a few days, we all thought there was a chance. Then things went bad very quickly. His kidneys started failing. Then came the pulmonary bleeding. We did what we could, but he died. It was awful, but medically speaking, it wasn't impossible to understand. In poorer areas, especially after heavy rain and flooding, leptospirosis can be brutal. Rat urine gets into dirty floodwater. Kids play in it. People walk through it. And sometimes the infection turns deadly. That part, as painful as it was, made sense. What happened afterward is the part I still can't explain. A few days later, his mother came back to the hospital for the death certificate. She looked exhausted in a way I don't think words can really hold. Like grief had hollowed her out and left her walking around by habit. She told me that Matthias had been acting strange for about a week before he got visibly sick. Not just quiet, not just tired. Strange. One afternoon, he sat both of his parents down at the kitchen table and told them, very calmly, "I'm going to die from leptospirosis." They thought he had heard something on the news. Maybe a warning after the floods. Maybe something at school. They told themselves he was being dramatic, the way kids sometimes are when they get frightened by a word they don't fully understand. But then she showed me the drawings. There were 3 of them, all folded and wrinkled, made on notebook paper with crayons and a cheap blue pen. Nothing polished, nothing artistic. Just messy, childish sketches with uneven lines and awkward little figures. Somehow, that made them worse. The first drawing showed a boy standing ankle-deep in a wide puddle of filthy water. He was smiling. Behind a tipped-over garbage bin, there was a little rat peeking out. His mother said he drew it before he had any symptoms. That alone made my chest tighten, because that is exactly how leptospirosis spreads in places like his neighborhood. floodwater, waste, rats. A dangerous little triangle hiding in plain sight. The second drawing showed him lying in a hospital bed. On one side, there was a doctor with a long white coat and something that looked like a stethoscope. On the other side, there was a nurse. Above the bed, floating near the ceiling, he had drawn this oval shape, almost like a tiny flying saucer, shining a thick beam of yellow light down onto him. It looked like the light was pulling him upward. His mother said he drew that one the night before they brought him in. Then she unfolded the third drawing. I still remember the feeling in my stomach when I saw it. It was a small chapel with a cross on top. There was a narrow window drawn in little colored blocks, like stained glass. Inside, there was a simple altar placed to the left, and a row of benches drawn at an odd angle. It was almost exactly like the small chapel inside our hospital, the one near the mortuary area, the one where bodies are sometimes kept briefly before they're taken by the funeral home. Same little window style, same layout, same strange position of the altar. Matthias had never been taken there. His mother swore he had never even seen that part of the hospital. I wanted to tell myself she was mistaken, that maybe he had passed it during another visit. Maybe someone described it to him. Maybe the drawing was generic and my brain was filling in the gaps. But I was holding that paper in my hand, and it looked like our chapel. Then she showed me the last thing. She opened a notebook where the family had written down passwords and little notes, and tucked inside was the name of the last YouTube video he had watched before he got worse. The song was called Doña Morte. I looked it up later because I couldn't stop thinking about it. The lyrics were about death coming for a young boy who became ill after the rain. It mentioned a fever burning from the inside, the body failing, the family being left behind. Not in a vague, poetic way either. The progression in the song felt horribly close to what happened to him. His mother said he had played it over and over the day before he told his parents he was going to die. I don't believe in omens. I don't believe in visions. I'm not religious. I'm not someone who sees ghosts in the corners of hospital rooms. I believe in cultures, blood work, imaging, renal panels, oxygen saturation, antibiotics, evidence. That is the ground I stand on. But this shook me, because I can explain one piece. A child hears about leptospirosis during flood season and becomes anxious. Fine, I can explain two pieces. Maybe he saw dirty water and rats around his neighborhood and made a drawing because it scared him. Fine, but 3 drawings? The source of infection, the hospital bed, the doctor and nurse, the light above him, the chapel where his body would later be taken. And before any diagnosis, he tells his parents the exact disease that would kill him. Then that song, playing on repeat, describing a sick boy taken after the rain. I keep trying to force it into something rational. Coincidence, grief reshaping memory, a frightened child absorbing details from adults, a mother, devastated beyond words, connecting dots that maybe weren't really connected. That is probably the answer. That has to be the answer. But when she was sitting across from me, crying quietly and smoothing those crumpled drawings with her hands, it didn't feel like an answer. It felt wrong. Deeply wrong. And I still don't know what to do with it. Hey, I want to share this story from when I was about 11 or 12 years old. It's one of those moments that stuck with me way longer than I expected. So my 2 friends and I decided it was a brilliant idea to mess around with a Ouija board. Spoiler alert, it didn't go well. A little backstory on the board itself. It belonged to the older sister, Dina, of one of my friends. Apparently, one day when Dina and a friend used it, they didn't say goodbye before putting it away. and whatever was on the other side freaked them out so badly they just shoved the board back in the box without a word. From what I've read since, ending a Ouija session without a proper goodbye can invite something unwanted to stick around, either with you or the board. But of course, we didn't know that then and went ahead with using the same board. My friend Aaron was spending the night at my place, and since we thought we were pretty fearless, we figured, why not? Our other friend Ryan lived just across the street, so we called him over to join us. We started asking if anyone was there, and the planchette spelled out Andra. That's actually my middle name, so that gave me chills, but I thought Aaron was messing around with me. Then it spelled out YOUMUSTRUN. Just saying that out loud now still gives me goosebumps. So naturally, we freaked out and tried to end the session properly this time. We ran over to Ryan's house across the street. Behind his place was this empty lot, fenced off with a small chain link fence, and since we were curious, we decided to sneak in and explore a bit. Erin's got this gut feeling about things, and when she said we should leave, I knew we needed to listen. The air felt heavy, tense. We hurried back to the fence, calling Ryan to come back, but he thought we were overreacting. Eventually, we convinced him, and as we were helping him climb back over the fence, because, yeah, we were all a bit chubby and clumsy, something weird happened. Both Aaron and I felt this strong resistance, like an invisible force was pulling Ryan's hood back, and he started gasping for air. It was terrifying. Somehow, we managed to get him over safely, and he just wanted to go inside and forget the whole night. Aaron and I walked back to my house, trying to laugh it off like kids do, but something was off. Because I have trouble sharing a bed, I ended up sleeping on the floor that night. The next morning, I woke up with 3 long, deep scratches on both sides of my waist. It looked like claw marks, but our cat was declawed, so it couldn't have been him. And I definitely didn't scratch myself in my sleep. That was the only time anything like that ever happened. But even now, years later, I still think about that night and wonder what exactly we stirred up by using that board. It was a wild, scary experience that taught me to be a little more careful about what games I choose to play. You know, working as the head social worker at a nursing home has given me a front row seat to some really profound moments. Some heartbreaking, some downright eerie. I want to share 2 stories about residents who, in their own way, predicted their own passing. It's not a spooky ghost story kind of thing, but these experiences have stuck with me. First, there was a resident. Let's call them Jame. Jame was under 60, stayed at our facility for long-term care because their health made living on their own tough. This was during the thick of the COVID-19 pandemic, around December 2020, right before the holidays. Jame seemed stable, no immediate health crises that would suggest they were nearing the end. One day, Jame asked if they could visit their family for Christmas. With all the restrictions in place, sadly, I had to say no. Jame was heartbroken, tears streaming down. I stayed with them, trying to comfort them, and brought in our director of nursing to help soothe their distress. Amidst the sadness, Jame confided something that really stayed with me. They were certain they wouldn't make it to the next Christmas. It felt so final, so real. We reassured Jame, reminding them their condition was stable. There was no medical reason to expect death so soon. But life had other plans, and just 2 weeks later, Jame passed away. It was tragic, and the circumstances were complicated, but that certainty Jame had. It was haunting. Then there's the second story, about another resident. Let's call her Margaret. She was in her 60s, dealing with multiple health issues, but we were optimistic she'd recover enough to return home to her spouse. One day, I overheard a nurse talking nearby, and suddenly, I heard Margaret cry out in distress. I rushed to her room and found her curled up in a fetal position, her face a mask of terror. When I asked what was wrong, she said she heard people just outside her door talking about how she was going to die soon and how they were digging her grave. I was taken aback. There was no one there, no such conversation. The nurse and I had been chatting, but nothing about death or graves. I tried to calm Margaret, assuring her no one was there with those intentions. She eventually settled down, and life seemed to go back to normal. But just days later, Margaret was transferred to the hospital and passed away shortly after. Even now, I can't shake that feeling. What was it Margaret sensed? Were there unseen presences outside her door? I don't have the answers, but these moments remind me how mysterious and fragile life truly is. It's these experiences that stay with the day is done. I've shared a few of my past experiences with the unexplained before, mostly because I believe in talking honestly about what I've lived through. To me, those moments are as real as anything else I know, as real as the fact that blood moves through our veins. The last time something like this happened to me was back in 2005 when I was still young. It scared me badly enough that it stayed with me for years. Eventually, I tucked it away so deeply that I almost forgot about it. Until my mother brought it up again and reminded me of the details. Since then, I've spent a lot of time reading about paranormal encounters. Not just believing everything either. My mom and I actually enjoyed trying to understand the psychology behind these stories and debunking what we could. For years, I never felt that same feeling again. Not until today. We were visiting the Kingston Penitentiary, and for my family, it was supposed to be a respectful trip into the history of our country. The place was built before Canada was even officially Canada, so you can imagine the weight of the stories inside those walls. Before the tour started, we went to the old warden's residence across the street. My wife, my mother, and I had been there before, and the first time I felt nothing strange, nothing heavy, nothing hostile. But today was different. I didn't feel anything walking up the stairs, but the second I stepped through the doorway, something changed. It felt wrong. That's the only word I can really use. Wrong. Unnatural. Like a dark pit had opened somewhere nearby, even though I couldn't see it. At first, I tried to explain it away. I hadn't eaten much. I'd been under stress. Maybe my body was just reacting to that, but the feeling didn't leave. Even after I stepped outside and sat on a bench for a smoke, it stayed over me. It felt like a heavy blanket I couldn't pull off. I felt exposed, raw, completely out of place. I told myself again that it was stress. I talked with my wife and tried to settle myself before we met back up with the rest of the family. Then we entered the penitentiary through the main doors. The building itself was impressive in that old, severe way. Limestone walls, cut generations ago, still standing with this cold confidence. You could feel the age of it. You could imagine the people who had passed through there, day after day, trapped inside that place. That was when the unease became sharper. We stepped into the courtyard. It was wide, clean, and green with grass. Honestly, if you ignored the bars on the windows, you might have mistaken it for an old school or some kind of institution. You would never guess the kind of suffering that had happened there. Then we reached the tour meeting spot. Behind us were two doors, one in front of the other. The first was a massive iron gate, barred like a traditional prison door, towering above us. Behind it stood an old wooden door, worn down by time. I touched the iron gate. The metal was cool, but not freezing. And the moment my hand made contact, this wave came over me. I need to be clear here. I've seen things most people should never have to see. I've lived through trauma. I know what fear feels like. It takes a lot to shake me. But touching that gate did something to me. The hair on the arm I touched it with stood up, even after I pulled my hand away. I felt horror, pain, fear, death. Not as an idea, not as imagination. I felt it as if all of it had passed through that gate and somehow left something behind. From that moment on, I became extremely alert. There were crows, or maybe ravens, overhead. Not gathered together, just appearing one at a time. One flew over after I touched the gate. Another had passed above us before we entered. I had this awful feeling that I wasn't supposed to be there. Like something new, I could sense it. We moved into the main cell block. My mom and stepfather were enjoying themselves. They didn't seem to feel anything at all. And I'm glad they didn't, honestly. There was artwork made by former inmates displayed in that area, but I felt nothing from it. That space felt empty to me. I even touched a few different spots, wondering if maybe the cold metal or the texture of the place had triggered the feeling at the gate. Nothing happened. Then, as we were leaving, we passed one cell with something wrapped around the bars. I couldn't tell what the material was. It looked almost like bandaging. For a second, I thought I felt something there, but it was faint enough that I can't say for sure. The next area was near the canteen, where the 1971 riot took place. Given what happened there, I expected to feel something, but at first I didn't. Then I looked down a hallway. It wasn't very long, maybe 15 meters or so, but when I looked down it, I had the distinct feeling that something was looking back at me. After that, we entered what I understood to be one of the main hub areas of the prison. That was where the fear became overwhelming. I don't mean I was simply nervous. I mean I could feel fear in the space itself. It was enormous, almost too much to stand inside. I couldn't stay there long, so I don't have many observations from that part. My only thought was that I needed to keep moving. Then we entered a secured cell block. There was a laminated sign that said, "Suicide Watch." At first, I felt only a small shift, something quiet and distant. But when I approached cell 16, it came back. Darkness, pain, fear, hurt, loss. Before I even looked inside, I felt it. And when I stepped into the cell, the walls were covered with words. Many of them had faded or deteriorated over time, but one phrase was still clear. "Help me." That was it for me. By then, I knew I had to leave. There was nothing else in that building I wanted to see, nothing else I wanted to feel. The only thought in my mind was, leave now. When I finally got out, I didn't take pictures. I didn't want any. The memories in my head were enough. But even outside the penitentiary, the dread didn't leave right away. I felt shaken deep down, in a way I haven't felt in 2 decades. I went in thinking the place was a beautiful historic site with a dark and unfortunate past. I left believing that something about it is deeply, deeply wrong. There is something there. Maybe not a ghost in the way people like to imagine ghosts. Maybe not something with a name or a shape. But there is darkness in that place. Pain, fear, and death have soaked into it somehow. And whatever remains there does not feel like it belongs in this world. I work in a field where I'm expected to see and handle things most people should never be asked to face. There isn't much that frightens me anymore. But that place frightened me. Not because it was old, not because it was a prison, not because I wanted to be scared. It frightened me because it felt wrong. In 2005, I had my first experience with something I couldn't explain. For years, I tried to understand it. I read everything I could, but it was hard to sort through genuine experiences, mental illness, exaggeration, and people claiming abilities they probably didn't have. Today was the first time in over 20 years that the feeling came back. My current theory is personal, and I don't know if I'm right. For most of my life, even from childhood, I didn't really want to live. I didn't want to be here. But recently, through therapy and help, something changed. I chose to live. I chose to actually be present in my own life. And I wonder if that matters. Maybe when we're children, we're open to the world in ways we later shut down. We believe in wonder before pain, stress, and survival teach us to narrow our vision. Maybe we lose the ability to sense certain things because we teach ourselves not to. Today felt like a piece of me had come back, a part I don't fully understand, a part that let me feel something I couldn't see, hear, or prove. I don't know what remains inside Kingston Penitentiary, but I know I will never go back. Whatever is there, whatever energy still lingers from all that pain and horror and death, I don't believe it should be disturbed by the living. Hey, I want to share this story that happened to me a few years back when I was babysitting my dear friend's little boy, who was just about a year old then. We didn't do this all the time, just on those rare date nights when she needed a break. You know, as social workers, we tend to be super careful about who looks after our kids. We've all heard the horror stories, right? So one evening, I was putting her son, whom I'll call Eli, to bed. After some playtime downstairs, we headed upstairs for his bath. Once he was clean, I was drying him off on the bathroom floor, playing peekaboo, when suddenly I heard something downstairs. Their little dog, a tiny yappy thing, started barking wildly. Normally it barks a lot, but this time it just wouldn't stop. At first, I thought maybe my friend or her husband had come home early, but the dog kept barking nonstop, and then I heard a man's voice downstairs, loud and clear, shouting, "Stop barking at that monkey!" And just like that, the dog went silent. I waited, expecting someone to come upstairs, but no one did. That's when a cold shiver ran down my spine. I realized neither my friend nor her husband was home. Panic set in. I grabbed Eli and looked around for a place to hide him safely, but my phone was downstairs. I was trembling, terrified, but I decided I couldn't leave him alone. So clutching him wrapped in his towel, I took a deep breath and bolted downstairs, heart pounding like never before. I grabbed the phone off the counter and sprinted back upstairs. I texted my friend, who said she'd be home in about 20 minutes. I searched the house but found nothing unusual. When she arrived, I told her and her husband everything. They exchanged glances and nodded knowingly. At first, they told me they sometimes call Eli Monkey at bedtime. Then they shared that they think their house is haunted, smelling cigar smoke, things moving or disappearing mysteriously. But the house had never spoken before. I was genuinely shaken. We're still close friends, but you better believe I didn't babysit there again after that night. Hey, I want to share a story about the old farmhouse I grew up in, called the Willow Creek Farmhouse. It was built way back in the 1800s, and my family, my mom, dad, and my brother, lived there until I was about 10. The place was pretty remote, surrounded by woods, and had this really old, creaky garage and a dirt basement with walls made from lead, which always added to the eerie vibe. Now, a bit of history. The house had some dark past, like a woman who was shot behind the garage and someone else who tragically fell down the stairs, breaking their neck. So yeah, spooky stuff. My brother once had a really unsettling experience. He slept upstairs with a window facing the backyard, right above the porch roof. One night, he woke up, pulled back the curtains, and saw a woman waving her arms back and forth on the porch roof. Imagine being a kid and seeing that. Needless to say, he freaked out. My sister, who didn't live with us but often stayed over, had her own run-in one night. She was napping on the living room couch, which was connected to the dining room, and woke up to see a little girl's apparition standing near our computer, just staring at her. She didn't stick around to chat, though. She ran upstairs and hid on top of my bunk bed. My mom? She had the most encounters by far. She's always been very sensitive and connected to the spiritual world. When we started packing up to move out, she felt like the spirits were upset with us. One morning, she woke up to a dark figure standing at the doorway of her room. She said it felt like it stared at her for minutes before suddenly leaping toward her and vanishing into thin air. That moment really stuck with her. What's strange is, growing up there, I never really felt alone, not in the usual sense. It was like the house had its own presence, sometimes comforting, sometimes unsettling. I'm still not sure if that was a good thing or a bad one, but it definitely shaped how I see the world around me. So this happened earlier today, and honestly, I'm still trying to settle my nerves. For some background, my friend has always said this house felt haunted, but nothing there had ever felt cruel or dangerous before. Strange, maybe. Heavy sometimes, but not like what we experienced today. She had also once told us that something seemed to follow her home from a well-known haunted place she visited. We thought it had been dealt with, cleansed, prayed over, whatever you want to call it. We really believed it was gone. My friend, I'll call her Kayla, used to live in this house with her grandparents. Her grandmother passed away, and recently her grandfather had to move out because he couldn't safely live on his own anymore. There was also this awful situation where a man from the neighborhood somehow convinced him to give up the house, which still makes me sick to think about. Anyway, today Kayla needed to stop by to grab some mail and see if there were any personal things left behind. It was me, Kayla, and her boyfriend, who I'll call Aaron. We had been hanging out for a few hours, and then we all drove over together. The moment Aaron and I stepped inside, we both got hit with this intense headache. It felt like pressure, almost like something was squeezing my head from both sides. I also felt pain behind my eyes, like I had been staring at a bright light for too long. Kayla seemed totally fine. She and I went toward the kitchen and dining area to look for the mail, while Aaron wandered through the house because he had this strong feeling that someone had broken in and might be staying there. He checked around, but he didn't find anyone. While we were in the dining room, I kept staring at one corner. I don't even know how to explain it. I didn't want to look at it, but my eyes kept going back there. Even when I forced myself to look away, I could still feel that corner sitting in my peripheral vision, like it was waiting for me to notice it again. After that, we all walked through the house together, checking for furniture or anything Kayla might need to take. Eventually, we reached the back bedroom, which had been her grandmother's room. That was when things got worse. Aaron and I both started feeling really hot. The headaches intensified, and my vision started to feel wrong, almost like it was slipping or blurring around the edges. Aaron got quiet and then told us something that made my stomach drop. He said he didn't remember walking around parts of the house. He said it felt like he blinked and suddenly found himself somewhere else, with no memory of actually getting there. That was enough for me. I walked out of the house because I couldn't handle the feeling anymore. It felt hard to breathe in there, like the air was too thick. As soon as I stepped outside, I felt better. Instantly, the pressure lifted, my breathing eased up, and I felt like myself again. Kayla and Aaron stayed inside a little longer, still looking around. I stood in the front yard, staring through the house, and even from outside, my eyes kept dragging back toward that dining room corner. When they finally came out, we started comparing what we had felt. Aaron and I had both experienced the headaches, the heat, the pressure, and that awful heavy feeling. Kayla said she felt completely normal the entire time. Then I mentioned the corner. That was when Kayla told me there had always been a spirit in the house, and according to her grandmother, it stayed in that corner. Her grandmother used to communicate with it. After that, they drove me home. Aaron still seemed uneasy, so I went inside to grab him some water. When he stepped out of the car, he immediately said he felt better. Then something even stranger happened. Aaron and I were standing near the driver's side of the car, and Kayla was sitting inside on the passenger side. When she got out and walked over to us, both Aaron and I started feeling sick again. The pressure came back. The uneasiness came back. But the second she moved back to the other side of the car, we both felt better again. That was when we started thinking maybe something had attached itself to her. I told her she should go back to the house and tell whatever it was to leave her alone and stay there. She ended up going back with a neighbor. They cleansed the doorway, and Kayla firmly told the spirit it was not welcome near her, her friends, or anywhere outside that house. Later, she called me and said Aaron felt better almost right away. He wasn't afraid to be near her anymore, and that awful feeling seemed to be gone. I still don't know exactly what happened in that house. I don't know if it was the spirit her grandmother knew, something else entirely, or something that had been stirred up because the house was empty and everything there had changed. But I know what I felt. And I know Aaron felt it too. Hey, I've got a story to share that's been on my mind for a while now. So my partner Andy and I moved into this really old cottage, like over 600 years old, in the countryside near the town I grew up in. It was this quirky big place that used to be part of an old hop mill before becoming a home. We had our dog Merlin, a lovable Labrador, and 3 cats with us. From day one, I felt these strange vibes in the front room and upstairs landing, like we were being watched, and those spots always felt colder than the rest of the house. The first night, after moving in, I caught a glimpse of tiny blue lights flickering across the ceiling. Andy saw them too and even filmed them. It was unsettling but also kind of fascinating. Over the years, the activity would come and go in waves. Sometimes things were quiet, then suddenly doors would open by themselves, footsteps would echo on the stairs, and ornaments would mysteriously be moved around. I remember times when I was home alone, and the dog suddenly started growling, staring at the stairs like she sensed something I couldn't see. Once, I even grabbed a knife and the leash, thinking maybe someone had broken in, but there was nothing there. The basement door, tucked under the stairs, would open on its own a lot, and sometimes I'd find our things placed right in front of it. The living room, with its wood paneling and view of the busy road, had this one corner by the window that always felt darker and uneasy. Both Andy and I saw shadowy figures out of the corner of our eyes there. One time, I saw a photo on a table lift a few inches into the air and then gently settle back down. It was like the house had its own secrets. We also heard voices on the upstairs landing, usually male, murmuring in a way we couldn't understand. Electric things would switch off and on by themselves, and our bedroom lamp with a dimmer slider would be bright at 3 a.m., even though it was hard to move the slider accidentally. The bedroom window was another strange spot. It would open by itself, swinging hard even on calm days, and I often felt like someone was standing over me when I slept with the bed under it. After moving the bed, I finally slept better. One of the creepiest moments was when Andy was cycling home at night. From the road, he could see me in the kitchen light, but also saw a light on in an upstairs bedroom we hardly used. Suddenly, the curtains pulled back, and a figure peeked out and waved at him before the curtains closed again. He asked me who was upstairs, but it was just me, and the light was off when we checked. Another night, the slate heart hanging on our bedroom door started lifting by itself, then slammed down so hard the whole door shook. The dog barked wildly, and the cats bolted off the bed. When we opened the door, the hallway was freezing cold and felt overwhelmingly unfriendly, like someone was glaring at us. We ended up spending the night on the couch downstairs. There were so many little odd things, but despite looking into the history, we found no records of deaths or tragedies. The cottage was also in bad shape, damp and isolated, so we were relieved to move out. On our last day, while packing up with Andy's parents, there was this sudden loud crash in the front room, like a metal pan hitting the wall, and we didn't stick around after that. Living there was definitely an experience. It was a mix of spooky and strange, but also memorable in its own way. Thanks for listening to my tale.